show this live on YouTube like we normally, if that's okay.
Down before I forget it.
Have a quorum. I'd like to call the special meeting of the Edgecombe County Commissioners to order. On the agenda, we do have 2 items to approve.
Mr. Chairman, if I may make an introduction before we start with those
Please do so.
2 items of business. I'd like to formally introduce to the board and to the audience our new executive assistant and clerk to the board, Ms. Tammy Faison. She started on Monday, and already she's sitting before you, is off to a great start, and looking forward to working with her. And also, as you know, Ms. Mungo will be retiring at the end of the month. And this will actually be her last time sitting before you in this capacity. She might be back here at the podium complaining about taxes or something after she retires. But, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I think it is absolutely fitting that we recognize Ms. Mungo and her service to the board. I'm going to ask Jason to bring something out for me, if he would.
Please do so.
It'll be a statue. A friend. Oh. Don't cry, friend. I'm cry with you.
I just want to say, in this public setting, Fran, you have done a phenomenal job in this role. You have worked so hard and have done such great work. And not only that, we've gotten close, all of us have gotten close as a family. And we've all kind of been wrestling with the last several weeks, trying to think about what it's going to be like and you to not be in this position. But we hope to, if not have you on the team, at least have you in our lives in some way. So on behalf of all of the employees and as well as the Board of Commissioners, we just want to present this token as a way to say thank you for your service to Edgecombe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And on behalf of the board, Fran, I think, Ms. Evans just echoed, I believe, our sentiments. But I just want to say you've been a good clerk, an excellent clerk in terms of anything that's been asked of us. I think you've done it, okay? And young lady, you've got some big shoes to fill. And looked like you're starting off in the mix of it. She put you in the hot seat. And evidently what I've heard, you probably able to do it. We will see. Ms. Harris, we'll start on with the agenda. We've got 2 items to approve. Okay. Number 1 is, go ahead, Ms. Evans.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. So we have application for lottery funds from the Edgecombe School System. The school system plans to use these lottery funds to perform, actually that's a correction to my memo, HVAC control repairs at North Edgecombe High School. To use these funds, the board, you must jointly request the funds along with the school systems board. Therefore, before you is the application for the public school building capital funds, which has already been approved by the school board. I recommend that you approve the application to request those funds.
Motion?
So moved. Second.
Questions? All in favor, let it be known by the vote sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, that application is approved.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You also have a few budget amendments before you. The first 6 are those that we ask you to approve. The first one is, these are some additional funds that are being received in the Department of Social Services to appropriate those funds. The second one is appropriating or moving within lines funds to cover payment costs for body cameras in the sheriff's office. The third is also appropriating some additional funds in the health department. The next is to appropriate funds from an insurance claim received for the fire that we had in the electrical system at the Human Services Building, appropriating those insurance claims received. And next is various changes you'll see there from between lines in the health department. And finally, correcting the appropriation for school resource officers from the public school revenue to increase that by $10,000. The others or the other one is one that is, I have approved, have the authority to approve. So I recommend that you approve those budget amendments 1 through 6 as presented.
Motion,
So moved.
Second.
questions? All in favor, let it be known by the vote sign of aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, those budget amendments are approved. Moving on to our budget work sessions, Ms. Evans.
So I will be, you have a copy of the presentation there in your book. I would recommend that you take the presentation out itself and maybe lay it aside to your notebook. Therefore, you'll be able to follow along in the presentation, make notes if you need to, and then I'll refer to the supplemental items that I have in here. Before I get started, I do want to say, I need to say thank you to everybody that's been involved in this process. Every year is a long and arduous process, and it takes us a long time to get to this point. I want to thank all of our department heads who worked on their individual budgets and brought those to present to us. They each had to do a lot of hard work to do that, had to make some difficult choices. I want to thank our executive team who's been working on this. Especially, I want to recognize Ms. Linda Barfield, our CFO, who's been very much involved in the details of this all the way through, up until last night, right, Linda? You may remember last year when she came in, we were about somewhat like middle way through the process. So she jumped in and grabbed hold and held on, and this is her first time being a part of it from the very start of it. And she's done a great job, and it's been my honor to work alongside her in this. All right. So first, I want to just as to always remind us of our vision for Edgecombe County. This is always to be in the backdrop, if you will, in everything that we do, especially when we're making difficult budget decisions. So, as you know, our vision is that Edgecombe County is a historic place that values its citizens and natural resources and creates opportunities where people are proud to live, work, and play for generations to come. And then our vision for our organization is that we will value our employees so that we can be an organization committed to providing exceptional services to our citizens through an innovative, passionate, and creative team devoted to excellence, integrity, and transparency for the continued growth of our county and staff. And of course, as you all know, we have embarked on a mission, a call to action of getting off the list, where we are focusing on those areas where we need to make improvements for our citizens. We have selected 4 focus areas, those being affordable housing, health equity, education and workforce, and youth and families. And so this call to action is also a major driving force in everything that we do, but especially with our budget. So today I want to sort of lay out the process for this budget presentation. I'll talk about our objectives for today's meeting, budget priorities. I'll show you a budget overview. Then we will talk some about revenues and expenditures, personnel, outside agencies, capital improvements, debt, our 2 enterprise funds, and then we'll come back with some other budget considerations. There will certainly be time at the end for you all to have discussion, to ask us questions, to give us direction if there's anything that you see that you would like changed or in some way in the budget. But as always, feel free to stop me at any time and either ask a question or make a comment if you'd like to at that time. Don't hesitate. So our objectives today is to first share our budget priorities and objectives. I've taken those budget priorities that you both gave to us last year in 2023 at your retreat. We had some updated conversation in this most recent retreat. Also, some direction given by the Budget Committee that have shaped our priorities. I'll review key budget highlights. I'll ask, if you will, to give feedback for the final draft that we will present to the public hearing, for the public hearing. If there's anything you would like to see changed in this budget, please let me know, and our staff we will certainly go back to the drawing board and make any changes that you'd like to see. And of course, our goal is to provide you with adequate information so that you can make informed budget decisions. But if there's something that I don't have for you today, I don't cover, I don't have the answer, let me know. We will certainly make note of that, and we'll bring that to you or share that with you in whatever way is appropriate. So our budget objectives is, of course, obviously we have to balance the budget. We have an objective of revisiting the vacancy allowance. That was a budgetary approach that we took first a couple of years ago. As we've talked about, that's been somewhat complicated to monitor, so we've revisited that approach. Our goal or objective is to minimize the fund balance appropriated, to add no new positions except where we feel like they are absolutely needed, to address critical capital needs, to align our discretionary funding with our getting off the list initiative, to follow our fiscal policies that you all adopted back in 2015, and also to allow the budget to reflect your priorities. Now, these are budget priorities. These were your previous priorities that we gathered from you at your retreat in 2023. Priorities that you shared with us was priority for employee salaries, public safety, education and workforce, and economic growth. And last year, as we shaped up this current year's budget, we tried to make sure that we wove into the fabric of the budget those priorities, and we made sure that we could call out ways in which we touched those priorities in some way. So we brought those same 4 priorities into this year's budget process. I've also added, based on conversations with you, feedback from you both at the retreat and other meetings, other additional priorities that we've added. Employee safety being one of those, school safety, county line merger, and lowering the tax rate as much as possible, where possible and as much as possible. So this is the 30,000-foot view of the budget as it is at this moment. So at this moment, what is proposed in this budget for FY25 is an 88-cent tax rate per $100 in value. We do, because this is a reval year, we do have to publish what the revenue neutral rate would be, and that revenue neutral rate is 78.4 cents. Of course, you know that our current tax rate is 95 cents per $100 in value. At 88 cents, 1 cent generates $437,876 based on our new values. The total budget as presented to you at this time is $77,879,703. That is an increase from the current year's original budget. We always compare the proposed original budget to last year's, or this current year's original budget. That is an increase of a little over $3.8 million, or 5.2%. This budget does include a fund balance appropriation of $6,921,447, which is almost $950,000 less from the original fund balance appropriation for the current fiscal year. Now we'll look on the revenue side. So first, this is ad valorem tax projections. You do have a copy of this in your notebook. You have it both there in the presentation, but you also have a copy of that in your notebook, if you'd like to refer to that. And of course, there's a lot of information here. The main thing that you may want to, the main thing that you want to look at And you'll see there are letters across the top columns, and then there are numbers along the rows along the side, just to make it easier for us to reference a particular sale. So if you look at that sheet, and they only have that in the supplemental copy of your agenda, or of your book. And it's attachment A at the top right. So if you look at, and you'll see this is broken out between what we call annual ad valorem, which that'd be real estate, land, that kind of thing, public utilities. And then the next category is for motor vehicles, and gap taxes for motor vehicles are the two primary categories. If you look at column B19, that is the total value that we have taxable. That is the total levy that we have available to tax, $4.3 billion, almost $4.4 billion. And so the next column C, that looks at if we were able to collect it all at one time or in 1 year, that's the total that we could collect. Of course, no county collects all of their taxes in that current year. And so then if you look at column G, in column G, we estimate what we will collect based on our most updated collection rate. And so that is 96%. We believe that we will hit 96% this current year. And so that tells us what we expect to collect of that available. So if you look at column G9, then that tells us that the total, in G9, that the total that we expect to collect is a little over $32.9 million there. And then if you look at column G14, that tells us what we expect to collect in motor vehicle. Now, in motor vehicle, we estimate to collect at 100%. That number is fluid because it depends on new car sold, that kind of thing, but normally because of tax and tags collection is done through the state, that's collected generally right at 100%. Did you have a question?
I did. I'm looking at this page. My number where the red budget increase in that number is not what I'm seeing on the screen. Got 4,750, and my book has got 4,600,000.
Okay.
You have was there a correct one I didn't get?
Okay,
attachment.
all right. That's my error. I think what I put in, what I put here is the one before we made the last update.
And the difference is that we've estimated second in the prior years, and that's 600.
That's right. That's right. So if you will, on the attachment A, that has attachment A, just make a note of, or you can just X through that, and we'll get you an updated copy. My apologies.
So which one's correct?
The one on the presentation.
Okay, which is
The
what
one
I
on
have
the
in my,
presentation is correct.
okay.
Is that what's in your book?
I got-
That's not what's in my
There are
book.
two forms in the book. So there's a presentation.
Oh, okay, we're on different
Okay.
pages. Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, so if you look, this is what's in the presentation as part of the presentation.
Okay.
My apologies. We were updating that as late as yesterday afternoon.
She got a big-
So what we have budgeted there, which will be in column K, what we have budget, FY budget draft proposal, you'll see we're estimating for current year collection, motor vehicles, and then first year delinquent, second and all prior, and then interest. So you see that there's a total of, our budget for the total of those is $4,750,000. Okay. Thank you for asking that question. I'm sorry I didn't realize that. So the next page here, what this shows you is sort of how we were thinking through where we might land with the tax rate. And by the way, the Budget Committee had the opportunity to discuss a lot of this. I will say I did make some updates since our last Budget Committee meeting. But if you'll look at this, the tax rate comparisons for FY '25, we just sort of ran these scenarios just to see what the additional revenue might be available to us. Of course, you'll see there in bold print, next to the last row is the .784, which is revenue neutral. and you'll see where I am with my recommendation of 88 cents. Okay. Again, don't hesitate to ask any questions if you have.
So at revenue neutral, we're still making $805,000 more than what we made this year.
We would be, yes.
So why are we asking for $4 million?
And I think we'll cover some of that as we go through. I mean, the short general answer is that because of increased costs, pay raises and those kinds of things, we just need more revenue than that
But we have a balanced budget this year.
with fund balance appropriation. Next is, this shows, you see this report or report like this at each of your meetings. This is sales tax revenue. If you look at the far right column, FY '24, those last 3 months are estimates, because it's not been reported to us yet what has been collected for those months. Basically, for the estimates, we took the 3 prior years and took the average of those 3 prior years. And so you'll see we anticipate to end the fiscal year right at almost $11 million in all sales tax articles. This sheet, again, which you're used to seeing in your monthly budget report, except for here at the bottom, we have some budget numbers. You'll see, if you look at the yellow box to the top right, that is comparing the difference in collected from FY '22 to '23. So it's $426,000 and some change additional that we collected in '23 from '22. And then the next yellow box, and that is looking at the difference between what we collected in '23 to what we project to collect by the end of this year. Of course, that number will be updated when we actually get those numbers. If you look down towards the bottom of that, that is comparing current year's budget for each of those sales tax articles. That's the current year's budget. I'm proposing, you'll see there in yellow, FY '25 proposed. I do want to note, in all fairness to the Budget Committee, this was something that we discussed. When we last met, we had those numbers flat. We had that a total budget of $9.9 million. We had some discussion about, we expect to bring in more than what we budgeted. We've always tried to be conservative in our budget numbers. But after we went back and looked at the total budget and some of these goals and objectives that I've just mentioned, and we'll talk about more, we felt like we need to be a little bit closer to being true to what we believe that we will actually collect. But even with that, we still do believe that we will collect more than that. That can certainly be a point of discussion for you all. And if you have some direction you prefer us to go back and be more conservative in that, we will do that. It will just mean, if we don't make any other cuts in expenditures, it'll mean that much more in fund balance appropriation. So you'll see we are budgeting a total of $500,000 more in those sales tax lines than what we have budgeted this current year. But if you look at if you'll see the column where sales tax budgeted versus actual, and we have FY '17 through '24. We have the budgeted, the actual, and then the difference. You'll see there for FY '24, we expect to collect a little over $1 million more than what we have budgeted this year. All right, some other revenue notes. Inmate housing, you'll see that I have a note there. Inmate housing, that has in the past primarily been federal inmates, though it also includes the housing of inmates both from state corrections as well as from other counties. But by far the largest amount of that revenue has historically been federal inmates. As you know, earlier this year, the sheriff, because of concerns, through vacancies in the detention center, that he stopped housing those federal inmates. So you'll see previous years' collected revenues in inmate housing. In FY '24, we are projecting to end at just under $350,000. You'll see a second note there. That does include right at $81,000 of federal inmate revenue that we got early in the fiscal year, because he did have some at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then he stopped housing those. So that's why you'll see that we are projecting, or we are budgeting an inmate housing revenue of $200,000. Next is EMS collections. You'll see what we collected in '22 and '23. It went up some from '22 to '23. This year, we're projecting it to land just under $3 million, and that was a question that the Budget Committee asked, a very reasonable question. You know, what's going on, what's happening, why is the revenue decreasing? Mr. Brown is here, and certainly if you have any questions for him, would like him to come up. I talked with him and I shared his response. But basically, it's a little bit of difference in call volume, not much different. That is one of the driving forces. But also just the, I guess, the makeup of the clients that we are transporting. And it depends on whether they are insured or not insured, whether it's private insurance or Medicaid. You know, we have a growing number of citizenry who are Medicaid eligible and receiving Medicaid, even with Medicaid expansion. However, Medicaid does not pay full price for the cost of these transports. And so I think it's a lot of ingredients that go into that equation, and it's always somewhat of a moving target. And so even those who are uninsured, they are billed, and we go through all the avenues that we have to try to collect on those bills, but that is somewhat of a volatile revenue stream for us. So that's where, so we're projecting a budget of $2.9 million in EMS collections for FY '25.
Another thing I've heard from citizens, they try to get somebody else to take them some EMS because they don't want to have to pay that bill.
All right.
So some folks are even refusing to be transported, even once they get there. They're like, you know, I'm gonna be all right, or somebody else is gonna take them. I know 2 cases of that. They would not get on the ambulance because they don't want to get that bill.
Sure, I understand. Oh, other thing I should mention, as Antoine brought to my attention, is the company that we're working with to collect for us. He's working with them to look at possibly increasing in the rates. Medicaid sets a rate. I believe we are below the Medicaid rate. We do have an opportunity to increase that. They'll be looking at that, bringing a recommendation to me that we'll forward to you. And that's just something we need to look at on a regular basis. You know, we do that in the health department as well. We constantly look at our rates for service. We look at what it costs. If there's an opportunity for us to increase those rates, you know, we hate to pass that along to our citizens, to our customers, but the reality of it is these are very expensive services for us to provide. And we have to do our due diligence in trying to make sure that we're operating them as efficiently as we can.
Since Mr. Brown was here, can you give me an idea? I don't know if you can, or give it to me later to be fine. The difference between a Medicaid patient and a private care patient, how much you might collect?
Yeah, I'll probably really rest on getting that to you
Okay.
a little later, just so I give
I'd
you
like-
actual information.
I'd like to know what that number is, because we got 51% of the people in this county on Medicaid.
Right.
And it's gonna continue to grow.
That's
And I
right.
expect to see that figure continue to drop.
That's right, that's right. And like Mr. Evans said, we are continuously pursuing avenues of trying to increase what our Medicaid collections look like, particularly in July. There's a cost analysis we did a few months ago that involved us kind of capturing the number of calls we run, personnel, assets we have, all operational calls, to hopefully together as EMS agencies approach Medicaid to say, hey, we need more funds. And so We have not got a response from that yet, maybe next year, but they do, I believe, recognize that we need to kind of get these rates up a little bit so that we are able to collect more funds. Because we can't go after, Medicaid patients, we private pay or commercial insurances, we can, to some degree, kind of go after or debt set off those patients to try to collect, but Medicaid patients, of course, what we're paid is really it. So based on what that rate looks like is really all, we're only collecting a percentage of that rate anyway. And so to get the Medicaid rate up would in turn hopefully allow us to increase more money.
So is the Medicaid rate set across the state, or what? I'm a little confused.
So they really base it off of demographics, number of calls ran, and the number of people, and really the socioeconomic status kind of plays a part as well. So it is different, and so we do see some neighboring counties, their rates are substantially higher, like $300 to $400 per transport higher than what ours are. During the transition from the rescue squad to county EMS, some of the historical data was captured from what the rescue squad was doing, and that really impacted kind of what our results were. Now that we have at least 3 to 4 years of service, 3 years in, we have more county-based data that we can use to hopefully get a higher rate.
Could you get that information to me? I'd like to present it to the association, so that I think it'd be part of our legislative goals when we go to the General Assembly from Human Services.
What's our expense in the emergency services department? We talked about revenue, but there's no expense number here.
What's the total?
Give me just a second, I'll pull it up.
Around a little over 5 million, I believe, was our total. I'll let her pull it up.
So we're projecting to run a $2.1 million deficit in emergency services by having that in-house.
Well, let me say that when it was with Edgecombe Rescue, years ago, we used to put in $1 million, and that was on top of collection. That went up to $1.5, $2 million. And so it got to the point that we felt like that it crossed over a threshold in my mind of how much money we had to put in, that because of that we needed to bring it in-house. So we didn't bring it in-house because it was going to save us money. We brought it in-house because we felt like because of how much we're having to invest, that needed to be something that we ran ourselves.
I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but is every EMS department in the state losing that amount of money?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and I can more than happy to get the data for you, but if you look at the EMS agencies across the state, out of the 100 counties, I believe it was at least 95 are county-run organizations. So you're not seeing many private rescue squads because they can't sustain. But to answer your question, we actually do very well with our collections in comparison to other counties that we see as far as how much money we collect. So yes.
And so, emergency medical services should be viewed as similar to like the health department, in that it's a service that we have to provide, whether we do it directly or indirectly. And it is not a service that its revenue covers its costs. It never has. And so, but it's a service that we have to provide. So we try to, as best as we can, to minimize that gap between what revenue covers and what we have to put in from general fund. But it has always been something that has required general fund appropriation.
I think the best I can recall is that our thinking at that time was it was getting out of hand, okay, in the private sector anyway, as he stated. And we probably could best manage it if we bought it in-house.
I have that total.
Okay.
The total for rescue squad is $6,404,461.
So 2.5 million. So we were putting $1 million in a couple of years ago. Now we're putting in 2.5 million.
It's just the cost of it has gone up.
It's been more than a couple of years, but we started out around $1 million, then it got up to
And then the next thing was 2 million.
2.5.
Right.
And I think it was based on whatever the fact that they were continuing going up, okay, and that And we weren't getting some answers that we needed
Right.
based on those increases. And the accountability of that, we were gonna have to give this money anyway. So why not? We keep it in-house, and we would know exactly where it was going.
And it's just like every other department we have, the biggest cost for us is personnel. And so it's a service that when the call comes in and that truck rolls, there has to be 2 people on that truck. Have to be qualified people to be on that truck. Also, we have to have the supervisors and those who are in what they call the quick response vehicles that are all paramedics. They drive separate vehicles. Sometimes, depending on the level of need, they have to go to the scene of that as well. And so it is quite a struggle, and it has been. It's something we've been working on. Compensation plan overhaul is part of this, is to compete with our neighboring counties for those 2 people to be on that truck. And I'm happy to say, as much of a struggle as it has been, we're able to provide the service. We have a truck, we have better vehicles now, better trucks, better equipment to be able to provide a higher level of service. We have all of our stations up and running 24/7. But it is something that's always running away from us because every county is trying to get these EMTs and paramedics. So what we've seen, and I know Linda and I looked at this a lot and even discussed it with Antoine when we talked about budget. We see one of those lines in there that has increased is overtime. Because if you don't have all of your slots filled, there's still got to be 2 people on that truck. So that means one of your full-time folks is also got to work some overtime, which is, of course, a time and a half. And so it has, so it's a growing cost, but I think we provide excellent service. Mr. Brown and his team are doing a great job, and we're happy to have it in-house. So.
And I know at one time, we did have trucks responding with 1 person on it in the Rocky Mount area, and they were getting some assistance from Rocky Mount Fire. But the issue was, if Rocky Mount Fire had to leave the scene, they couldn't put them in a truck because they had to have full on their truck. So I think this is solved, well, it's costing us, and I guess I don't believe that everything, our tax dollars are still very well spent, even in some of the departments that are in the red, which we maintain.
We've also been strategically using the Medicaid cost settlement funds that we receive. As y'all know, when we were already using cost settlement money when it was with Edgecombe Rescue to purchase equipment. And as we brought those in-house, we had aged trucks, aged equipment. We really needed to catch up with that. We just couldn't afford to go out and buy 4 or 5 trucks at one time. And so we've strategically, every time we've gotten some Medicaid cost settlement, we present it to you. We recommend we use this to buy a truck, either a new one or remount. And so we've slowly been building that fleet up and getting newer vehicles. I think at this time, how many do we still have from Edgecombe Rescue, the old trucks? Still 5 of them.
200,000 hours, at least 8 years old.
Right. So it's still a climb up that hill, and hopefully we'll soon get some additional Medicaid cost settlement funds, and we'll bring that back to you. Investment.
Any other question?
Yes, I'm sorry.
My final question is,
Yes.
when can we go back to appeal to get a little bit more money through Medicaid? July of this year. So we'll have an answer in July whether or not we'll get more money,
Or shortly thereafter.
or shortly thereafter.
And we'll have to bring that to you for your approval to increase that, to change that fee schedule.
I think this needs to be a part of our legislative discussion with Shelley and with, or Representative Willingham, and with our lobbyist as well.
Sure. Good point.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to find out, so that when I go to my meeting end of this week, that I find out what other counties across the state are suffering the same thing. So if we can get a conglomerate of folks, the association, when their lobbyist goes in there, that speaks a whole lot more for everybody than just one or two counties trying to get it done.
That's right.
If we have the whole association behind us, so. I'm on the Human Services Board, so I'll make sure I put that one in.
Good, thank you. Thank you, good point. Anything else on EMS?
Go ahead.
The other revenue line of interest is investment income, which for us is interest we received in funds in our accounts. You'll see how that has grown since FY '22. Of course, we know because, number one, we've had more funds in those accounts, particularly from our fund balance, as well as large grants from various sources, and interest rates have been high. So we project that we're going to end this year with a little over $1.5 million in that interest income revenue. We're never sure. The feds and others keep speculating about when interest rates may go down. Haven't yet, but we'll see where that goes. But just to be conservative, we're budgeting $500,000 in that revenue line for next year. So we'll talk some about,
Do we have the fund balance? Do we have what the fund balance is?
the fund balance is now.
I didn't see it in any slides.
You mean current total fund balance or what we're appropriating?
Current total and then what we're appropriating.
Yeah, and Linda, if she'll look and see what we anticipate the total fund balance, but the appropriation is, let me go back to that slide. So we are appropriating 6.9 million in FY '25 is what we're appropriating.
$6,921,447.
But then he asked for the, what is the total?
For what is it? Are you asking for the total for
Yeah.
this year?
Yeah.
So we'll let her get that and we'll come up with that too, if that's okay. So regarding expenditures, as you've heard me say before, as you already know, personnel is our largest expenditure category. Of course, we're always trying to build our team, not just build in numbers, but build in capacity and ability so that we can serve our citizens. In this budget, as you know, we did an overhaul of our compensation plan. We totally restructured our compensation plan as well as we elevated our salaries across the various grades. You voted to implement that some months ago. That included an increase for our staff. In some cases, it was 5%. In sheriff detention and EMS, it was 8% for those in the health category, that being more clinical positions, and then 10% for the rest of the staff is right at $1.7 million it costs to do that. Just as a reminder, when we had that market study done, and Mercer was the consultant that did that for us, when they said, okay, we're going to compare you to the market. The market is a lot of things. They were going to look at us with other surrounding counties as well as other counties that were within a range of population. So I think it was around 13 or 14 counties they compared us to. They also could have compared us to the private market as well, because we do compete with the private market. All of our staff that leave us don't all go to another county or town. But when they start looking at that, they realize that was just so far out of the reach, it just made no sense for us even to contemplate that. So instead, what they did was looking at those comparable counties and surrounding counties. And you'll remember that for our general staff, which is the vast majority of our employees, we were 25% on average away from the market. When you agreed to let us go 10% increase for our folks in general staff, general county staff, that helped to close that gap some. But you've been hearing me talked about it even more at the retreat, that we don't need to stop there. In fact, we really need to constantly look at our compensation plan. So part of the work, part of the effort we tried to do with this budget is looking at seeing what could we do next. What could be phase 2 of compensation plan implementation. You'll remember I talked some about we were considering implementing something called a years of service model. That is where every employee, based on their position, falls on our compensation plan or our salary grade. And it has a minimum and it has a max. We can't pay them less, we can't pay them more. Most folks, when they come in, they start at the bottom of that grade or pretty close to it. And so then, of course, throughout the course of time, through whatever means, they, matriculate up that scale. And so the years of service model, what that does, it takes into account how many years the person has been doing that work or work that is substantially relevant to that work. That is, if a person has been doing a particular job over time, they get better at it, they've got experience, so therefore the idea is that they should be paid, compensated better for that. And so we were looking at that model and not only looking at, okay, how long have they been in that position with us, have they done something substantially relevant to that before they came here? And so, for example, maybe if we hired someone in a financial position and they did that same work somewhere else, that we could recognize the years of service before they came to us. So we looked at that. We have a committee, we call it the compensation plan team. We've been meeting, talking about lots of things, compensation plan related, HR and payroll. But we sort of looked at that and realized that that would be very complicated and difficult for us to implement at this time. That might be something we want to do down the road, but it would just be very difficult for us to try to put something in place, a policy, so that we can consistently apply that as best as we can. So we've sort of put that on the back burner for now. So instead, what I'm proposing in this budget is that we look at, for all staff, a 3% cost of living increase. As we all know, the cost of living has continued to be high, over the last few years. And then in addition to that, a 2% market increase. To close that gap just a little bit more between us and the market. And so what we're recommending is a total of 5% increase for all staff. And that comes to a total of $1.2 million, a little over $1.2 million, and that includes both the salaries and its impact on FICA and retirement and 401k. I will note, I have that one there as a note down at the bottom. What I realized yesterday was that we had not factored into that number that for staff, most staff in the Department of Social Services, whatever we pay them, we get reimbursed at least 50%. In some positions, Medicaid positions, right now it's 75%. So really that impact is minimized. And then in the health department, some of those positions are funded by outside resources, state grants in most cases. So actually that total number will be a little less, will be less than that. And so right now we have the 1.2 built into the budget. We'll go back. We realized that was going to take us some time to go and get a good number on that. So right now this is what we have. Before I bring you the final budget, we will update you on what that is. Secondly, we've been seeing higher than average claims in the last 2 years. As you know, we are self-insured, so we are totally driven by our own claims, not the claims of us and other counties and towns in a pool or something. It is totally driven by our own claims. We were fortunate for several years that we had, overall relatively flat claims, but in the last 2 years we've been experiencing some pretty high claims. So at the recommendation of Mark III, our benefits broker recommended that we increase our premiums by 6% to catch up and stay ahead of that. We have to make sure that we have enough money in the health fund to pay those claims when they come in. We estimate that to be an approximate increase of $340,000.
Have you noticed where you experienced a higher than average claims? Is there a certain department?
No, it's kind of spread out, but we do see some of the usual suspects as to the types of claims. Cancer is a very expensive illness to treat, both the treatment and the medicines, things like back surgeries, things like that. And really the drivers of those high claims is a relatively small pool of employees, but it's just things that are very costly. Some of those are long-term that are driving those costs, but it's not in any particular department that we're seeing. That's a good question.
Started any conversations around quoting, not self-insuring or any of those?
Yeah, and I'll have that in the slide. We're going to look, and we talked about that with the budget committee. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll share with you in just a second sort of what the options that we will look at to bring back to you. That's a great point.
We're paying about $1,253 per person for insurance. And when we met, I told Mr. Evans, I'm a fan of self-insurance, but it may be time to look at the market, because the bigger the pool, the less the expense. Now, I don't know, healthcare is a loose cannon. It doesn't matter what you do, it's gonna change every year. And we see it change right here. It's just the way it is.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely right.
But with a 6% increase, it's time to look at it.
Oh, yeah, well, $1,253 a person, but we don't know that we can do any better.
And I will say, we have been fortunate over the last few years. We've had minimal increase. In fact, the last 3 years, we weren't required to do an increase, but we went ahead and did a 1% or 2% just to stay ahead of it. Where some other counties were seeing double-digit increases, and it's just, as Mr. Boswell's point, it's a loose cannon. It's hard to wrap your arms around. And we'll come back and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Also, the third thing, personnel related, is, as I've mentioned before, in lieu of using a vacancy allowance approach, we are going to placing some positions in reserve, and I'll talk about those positions in a second. But just to go back a little bit and talk about the compensation plan, I know this is a busy slide here, and this just shows the different scenarios that we consider. We have them broken down by the position and where the position is located. And you'll see what the sum of the salary is and all of that. We looked at what if we did, because as you remember, the gap between general employees, not all employees, but general employees was 25%, and we closed it by 10%. So we looked at what if we did more for just those in the general category and less in the others, and all of those scenarios, you'll see those costs. And so where I've landed is that column that says 5% for all employees, and that's where we get that $1.24 million number.
So 1.2 for what you're proposing now, and last year's salary increase plan cost, what was the final cost of
1.7.
1.7.
Yes, sir.
So that's $3 million pretty much in 2 years.
Yes, sir.
There's part of your budget right there, Mr.
Yeah, I guess part of my frustration here is we spent all that money on Mercer doing all this work, and to get away from COLA and just blanket 5% increases or 2% increases, and now we're saying, oh, it's too much work to do that work going forward, so we're just going to go back to doing 3 or 5% increases. So why did we spend all that money with Mercer?
I'm not sure if I follow when you say we said it was too much work.
You said that in going through each department and trying to break out which ones actually have the most discrepancy besides just general. I mean, if we could break it down by who actually needs the pay increases. I mean, we're lumping in $12 million of salary and just saying, oh, they're all 25% under.
No, that's not what I said. So we know general employees was 25% from the market.
And that's $12 million.
We know that sheriff, detention, and EMS was 5%. We know that health was 8%. So last year we did 10% for those that were 25% away. We did 8% for those in the health category that was 8% away, and we did actually sheriff and EMS showed us right at market, but we still did a 5% on that. Now, we know that the market around us has never stopped. Everybody around us if they've not already they're having conversations about continuing to increase. Now, we could pay Mercer to come back and update that to see, okay, still we're just based on what we know from the work that they had done for us some months ago. So that's why, if we were 25 for general employees and we only close at 10%, that's still 15%. We can't do that. So that's why I'm just recommending that we look at for everybody regardless, because we know the cost of living as, you know, has been going up and still going up now, and then taking another step, 2% closing for those of us that were 25% away, now 15, and then doing the 2% for the others because we know that the market has still grown away from them. Now, what I was saying earlier in that 1,240,857, that number will be a little lower than that because we realized yesterday that what this does not take into account is that for the employees in many of the employees in social services, we get reimbursed half of their salary, 50%. Some of them we get reimbursed 75%. And then in the health department, it's all over the place, but some of those positions are paid for by state grant funds, and so part of it is us, part of it is the county. What we need to go back in is to get to that level of detail, and so we can give you that. We know it's going to be less than $1.2 million, and that's the number we'll have for you before we present at your June meeting.
And I'd like to know that number whenever you get it, just to see
Yes,
how
sir.
much it changed.
Of course. Any other questions about? Okay. So back to your question, Commissioner Thorne, about health insurance. And so, and this was brought up by the Budget Committee as well. So our plan is, what we will do is, we will get an independent review of our health plan. We will look at some options. We will look at a new plan structure to stay self-insured, but to look at using another provider. Our provider now is Cigna. Cigna manages it for us, and they charge us a fee for managing that. We will look at that scenario. We will also look at our current plan, self-insured, with a, let me back up. We will look at a new plan structure using our current provider, which is Cigna. We will look at to see if there are any benefit movements that we can make that will give us any significant savings. The second option is we will look at basically the current plan that we have, but using another provider, somebody else other than Cigna, and see if that might provide us with any savings. And then the third option we will explore is whether or not options of joining a pool with other counties or other entities. Now, right now, the state health insurance plan is not open for counties and towns to join. It opened up, I don't know, some years ago, and a number of counties and towns rushed in to become part of the state plan. And a couple of years later, they quickly closed the door because everybody was coming in and were having high claims costs. And I'm sure y'all see a lot in the paper and the news about state health insurance. But we will look at, there are a couple of that we're aware of, and maybe more that we're not aware of, but there are some options we believe out there for other pools we may join. We do have to keep in mind, and we'll talk about this more when we bring this back to you, is that normally when you join a pool, a lot of times you're locked in it, and you have to stay in it, and you lose control of the composition of your plan. That might be a worthwhile trade-off depending on how much we might be able to save, but we will certainly explore that. Our goal is going to be to have that work done and to bring that back to you before the end of December, because if we're going to make some moves, we'll need to make it so that we're ready for open enrollment that following year.
Got a question for Ms. Harris.
Yes, sir.
Did they not ever discuss that at the county commissioners? Is there no pool amongst the county commissioners' organizations? Is there any possibility of pooling them,
They got rid of the health pool because of what he's talking about.
losing money?
The cost
Okay.
and all of that. So now the pools only have workers' comp and your liability.
Just was curious.
Okay, but we'll be looking at that and gathering some information and bringing it back to you.
We might have to look at employee contributions.
Yeah, absolutely, and we've talked about that some internally as well. Right now, technically, all staff have to pay $50 a month, but as long as you do the annual health assessment, that is waived. As an incentive for people to participate in that. We normally have a few, somewhere 20 or so, that choose not to participate in for whatever reason, and they pay that. But you're right, it might be for us to be able to get more robust plan, or even to maintain the plan that we have, we may have to look at that. That'll be something we'll have to approach lightly, right? Because,
I said it lightly.
oh, absolutely.
There's no way to say it.
Absolutely.
You're talking about somebody running to another county.
But if we're paying $1,250 per employee, it's not difficult for me to look at it, okay, in terms of $50 or something contribution, or that helps contributes to pay for the plan. But we're not there yet. But I think we might as well put it on the table, and so that if the employees would be aware that that's something that in the future we might have to consider.
Sure. And I will say that it's been some months ago now, maybe probably last year. I was hearing that a lot, some cases directly from some staff, sometimes through our department heads, employees saying, hey, can we get better health insurance, our out-of-pocket costs? We've got a deductible of whatever it is, our out-of-pocket cost is just too much, I can't afford to use it, and I totally understand that. And so we sat down, had a conversation with our benefits broker, and ran some scenarios as to, okay, if folks paid X amount, how much could that reduce the out-of-pocket? And then I sent out a survey to staff saying, if you were to pay this and get this lower in out-of-pocket, what do you think about that? And we got some very interesting feedback on that. I think it's a difficult thing because really to move the needle in a noticeable way on those out-of-pocket costs, you have to charge, they have to contribute right much up front to get that. And
Robbing Peter to pay Paul.
yeah, it's a trade-off that's difficult. If you were to walk around and ask staff about what do you think about our benefits package, I would imagine you might get half and half. Some say, oh, I think it's pretty good, and some might say it's horrible and we need to do better. And it all depends on the individual situation. If they have children, how much they use it, those kinds of things. I will say it has been important for us, and and y'all know we've been working on this for some time to see what else can we do in relatively low-cost ways to add some additional benefits to our health insurance plan. So as you know, for a long time, we've been doing the health incentive. So employees do the health screening every year, and if their weight or if their waist is below a certain threshold, they get a $250 incentive, or if they make a 5% improvement in either weight or waist from the previous year, they get a $250 incentive. And we have, I don't know how many employees that get that, a lot. I mean, 150 or so, I guess, maybe more. And a lot of staff pay a lot of attention to that. Ms. Best gets calls and emails, when is the thing? Because I want to make sure I'm ready. I'm trying to get my weight down so I can get that. So that's big. We have an option in health insurance. We have the high deductible plan with the HSA or health savings account. And so if they get the high deductible plan, that means they're paying more out of pocket, but we give them $750 that goes onto that account. It goes onto a card, and they get that, and if they don't spend it, they keep it, and it rolls, and they, it's non-taxable, and it's, they can accumulate that. And so that's an option. We've been doing what's called the Health Map RX program for a few years now, and that is for employees that have diabetes. They can participate in the program where they get coaching, they get free diabetic supplies and certain things and some incentives for participating. We usually have 30 or 40 employees, and then this year we added a new program that's similar to the Health Map RX program, but it's a weight management program, and that is for any employee that has a BMI, body mass index, of 40 or more. They can participate if they want to. They get coaching. There's some incentives, but they also get access to pharmaceuticals that aid in the loss of weight. And I don't know right offhand I don't remember right offhand how many we have in that program, but we have a number in the program. And so, all of these things we've sort of been tacking on just to try to give as much of comprehensive health and wellness plan as we possibly can.
Can we check around the state of how many counties actually have their employees pay part of their,
Sure.
just to see? Because I work for the state and I have to pay mine every month.
And
I
you
don't
you say you do have to pay them?
Yeah, for the state.
I'm a retired state employee, and I've been getting free insurance for 30 years, so
Really?
We need to get you paying him.
I'm not, I put it on the table because we just have to consider, because I'm not necessarily want to do that, but we have to make hard decisions here sometimes. But I came out when the state was paying it, one of the reasons. So I wouldn't get fired, I went ahead and got retired, okay?
My wife.
It's a great benefit. It's a real, and I just really think that from an employee standpoint, is the reason I stayed in public service, and with a local government is because of the insurance, because of that benefit. I think we just need to help our employees understand the benefit that they've got, okay? $1,200 a month is something that if we were working and had to pay it, most of us could not pay if we want another job.
And I will say, the list of counties that still don't pass that cost along to their staff is getting short. The other thing is that the list of counties that for our employees that retire with 30 years,
Right.
we'll pay their insurance until they turn 65. And the list of counties that still do that is getting shorter as well. But, again, it's sort of that balance. We're compensation is one thing, health and benefits is another. We try to keep as much on the table to be as competitive as we can. So, in some ways where we may not be quite as competitive on salary, we have these other things. I came across a retired employee, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and he was telling me that he didn't realize until after he retired how great of a thing it is that we're paying for his health insurance until he turns 65, because it's super expensive to get it on your own. So, but
From the state, it has become my secondary insurance. The state still pays for it.
right, that's right. Anything else on health benefits?
Moving on.
So, as you know, for the last couple of years, we employed a budgeting approach of using vacancy allowance. So basically, as a summary, what we were doing was, all the positions in every department, we have a number, what the needed, necessary, and optimal number of positions are in that department. We would budget for it at the beginning of the year. If there's nobody in that seat, we plug in a number based on the position, the salary. We figure what benefits and all of that is, and we just budget it. And we know that we never are 100% fully staffed. We've never been. Nobody ever is. Sometimes it's more vacancies than others, kind of ebbs and flows. Of course, in our larger department is more in those departments, obviously, than others. But what we did in the last 2 years to minimize the amount of fund balance we appropriated, we said, well, we're going to go ahead and budget for all those positions, but we're going to recognize that we will have lapsed salary, health insurance benefits, those kinds of things. And we plugged in a vacancy allowance. And so in any of the departments that had that, they had a positive number in that revenue line, and then they had another revenue line that had a negative number. So basically tying up the amount of money that we felt was going to be unused. And that enabled us to be able to minimize how much fund balance that we had to appropriate to balance the budget. We've learned in the last couple of years, though totally, I believe perfectly good reason why we did it, but we've realized that it's difficult to monitor, right? It's difficult to monitor. And so what we've decided to do this time was instead just to go on the opposite side of that seat, right? And we still recognize that there will be vacancies, that they have been and always will be, and there will be a certain number of seats that are available. And instead of budgeting and then putting in a vacancy allowance, what we're doing is we're recognizing that there are positions that are needed and they're for optimal service provision but remain unfilled. We will monitor the need for these positions and the potential for filling them and revisit appropriating funds for them if needed. So you'll see in these departments, this is where we are putting some positions in reserve, okay? So you'll see some in DSS, emergency services, emergency medical services, health, solid waste, sheriff, which is detention positions. And I will note, you've heard me mention before that the sheriff had already indicated to us cutting 8 positions because of the loss of the federal inmates. This is 5 additional positions, putting them in reserve.
We're not cutting them.
We're not cutting them. These are still on the books as identified as these are positions that
We're just not putting funds in.
we're just not funding them. That's right. Now, this is, obviously, this is a change. This is a switch. It's a new approach. And it'll be something, again, it's not like we can sit back and relax and it will take care of itself. This is something that we will have to monitor very closely. And I will say, I mean, for an example, you know, in social services, you know, right now there are, I don't know, 45 or so vacancies in that department. And it has hovered, you know, around 40 for, I don't know, the last 4 years or so. I understand, you know, this is not a popular approach for our department heads. I will admit that. Because I know that in all of these, at some point, they're going to feel, I'll need to fill these positions, I'll need to fill these positions. But I will tell you, history has told us we've not filled these positions. I'll give you as another example in planning. That one position is a full-time building inspector position. Right now, we have a full-time position filled. We also have a part-time building inspector who's fully certified. That's under contractual services. This is a second full-time building inspector. We've had this second building inspector position on the books for several years. We've not filled it. Okay, so I'm putting that position in reserve. And so some of these departments, when they came with their budget, they said, okay, we're budgeting less, for example, EMS and health. And so, but I will tell you, in order to be able to do some of these things we're talking about, in order to minimize our fund balance appropriation some, in order to bring that tax rate down some, in order to do some of the critical capital purchases that I'll talk about in just a minute, in order to, you know, the salaries and all these other things, this is something that I believe that we absolutely need to do.
But I see that one planning, didn't our planning director retire?
She's going to,
Going to retire?
the end of June.
Okay. So
Right.
then that'll be another.
Right, but we'll certainly, you know, fill that position. This is a building inspector position.
Do we have any idea, is it just salary that is keeping us from getting that person?
What, the
Do you
building?
feel like it's just salary or is it something else?
Building inspector? Well, that's some of it. You know, we have increased the salary for that. We also offer what we call a credential incentive in that. So a person that comes in, it used to be 2.5%, now it's 5%. Every level of certificate they get another 5%. The young man that we got now is doing a great job. He's getting certified up. He's benefiting from that. And so it's some that is, the other thing, the reality is that the pool for building inspectors across the state is mighty shallow, mighty shallow. It's just not enough folks going into that field.
Which slows down our folks from getting their certificate of occupancy and all this other stuff that they
Well,
complain.
I will say now that we have a full-time, and he's getting certified up. I think he has at least level 1 across the board, I believe. Working on level 2 and one or two of the other ones. And it takes a while to get that. It's not like I take this test this week and go back. You have to have so many months and time under your belt working with the building inspector and then pass the test and get ready to study and all that. And so, first of all, he's super smart to pass those tests because they're difficult. And then we have that retired building inspector. He's done some work for us and I think another county. We're grateful to have him because there are certain things that our full-time inspector can't inspect. There are certain things you can have a 3 and a 4 to inspect. And so, you know, so right now they're covering the bases well. Eventually, we want to have 2 full-time inspectors because at any point, the gentleman who's working part-time, he could say, you know what, I've never really felt what retirement really is like, so I'm just gonna go on and retire. And, but I will say that, he not only, you know, obviously we're paying him for the work, but, you know, in the times that I've met him, I can tell that he really and genuinely feels like he's providing this as a service to us, and I can't remember which other locality he's working with, because he knows what the landscape looks like out there for building inspectors. So, any other questions about that?
I appreciate this approach. It's much cleaner.
Well, thank you. We feel so too, but again, I want to say, I totally understand why, you know, our department heads would feel a little nervous about this.
Well, the positions are still available. It's not like that you got to come back to the board.
That's right.
So so if you show us all you got to do is see the need
No, well,
and come back to us for appropriation.
I have to come back to you for money, that's
For
right.
the
That's right.
appropriation for those positions, but,
Just there.
That's right. And so we'll have to monitor it closely and stay ahead of it, you know, not wait till we get, oh, I got 5 people just showed up and I really love to hire them, but I don't have, you know, so we'll have to be agile in looking at it. As we try to minimize adding any position unless we absolutely feel it necessary, there are 3 positions, new positions added to this budget. One is in Elections Department, the Deputy Elections Director. This is a new position that was added to our list when we did the new compensation plan, though we did not budget for it in this current year. We do plan to budget for it in FY25. This will be to improve the management structure and succession planning in the department. Also, in emergency services, we do have built in 2 firefighters who will be those that will provide that supplemental fire protection at Kingsborough. Yes.
I'm not necessarily in favor of adding a position that's going to be on the books going forward just for succession planning.
Well, I think that in the future, in my opinion, and I think we always need to have someone in that higher level position to have someone who's learning at a higher level, so that whether it's for retirement or something just happens, that you've got that. I think you also need that additional level of experience and expertise in the office just for general operations. Now, to your point, you know, when we get to that succession transition, we may determine that we don't need to come back and fill this, but for now, we do.
That's a slippery slope, though, because we just talked about putting a bunch of positions in reserve that haven't been filled in 5 years for various reasons. And so once you have that position, it's hard to get rid of it.
Maybe so, but
But
it's something that I do believe that
we just lost a person who passed away in the Board of Elections.
that's correct.
who
But
was-
that position's open to be filled.
And then you got to look at the director moving on up in age.
That's right, but then you hire for a director when you don't create a position to create a succession plan that's going to be on the books going forward. You hire another director after they retire.
Well, it says to improve management structure and success, so it's not just for succession planning, according to what he said.
What we're trying to head off is that, heaven forbid something were to happen to Mr. Sproul or whenever he decides to retire, and we're not able to quickly or even fill the position at all with a competent person. The folks that work in the office now all do wonderful work in their respective positions, their particular work. We don't have a position in that office now that is a high enough managerial, experiential, education level that would be somebody that he just walked out, didn't come back, that could at least grab the reins temporarily. We just don't have that. And I know I'm telling you something you already know, but elections is one of the most, if not the most important function that we provide as a county. And I will say Mr. Sproul does a wonderful job, and I will tell you, when I became manager, I thought, wow, that's a heavy responsibility we have in holding and managing and taking care of our election processes. But I will tell you, I have not had to lose one night's sleep over that because he does such a great job. He keeps me informed. I know he's going to take care of it. He tells me about the results after it's done, and he manages it well. So it's my recommendation, but certainly up to the board to decide.
Well, I can understand what you're saying in terms of we lost probably one of the most knowledgeable people from that office recently. And that knowledge is gone, and we need to put that knowledge back into the office because it's a job it's one of those jobs that we don't see, but it's there and it's working all the time and preparing for future elections that might jump off when we have, some of the jobs we don't see, we really don't know what they do. So I can support the position.
But we didn't lose the position, we just lost the person that was in the position.
Who had as much knowledge as the director, or more.
I understand, but we could hire someone into that position that has that knowledge. That's what I'm trying to say. We don't need to create another position just because we lost someone that has experience.
Well, I think we can continue to talk about that throughout the budget process, but right now, I'm in support of what I see. And when we finish the budget, it might or might not be there. But right now, I'll say I'm in support of it.
Anything else regarding these three positions? So, outside agencies. So as we look at the overview of that, if you'll look in your packet, and it'll be on the screen, I guess, maybe it won't be on the screen, but if you want to look at inside your packet, it's labeled Attachment E. But just to give you the overview for our outside agencies, we have a total request of $16,461,247. Of those outside agencies, the vast majority of those are entities that we are required to provide funding for because of state law, like schools and community college. Or we have dictates by interlocal agreements, partnership agreements, for example, that we will fund. For example, both of our libraries. Years ago, we entered into an agreement with the town of Tarboro to provide funding for the library here in town. For the library in Rocky Mount, we entered into an agreement with City of Rocky Mount, Nash County to provide funding. So we don't consider those discretionary. We're required to provide funding, though we may have some opportunity to decide how much funding we provide. But then there are those discretionary allocations that we make. Those allocations that we're not required to provide funding, but we choose to, and some of those we have given money to nonprofits, most of which are for a number of years, small amounts, not relatively larger amounts. You'll remember I talked about this back at the retreat. I recommend that we take another approach to that discretionary funding. I recommend that we instead be more, targeted and purposeful with those organizations who are doing programs and providing services that more closely align with our Getting Off the List initiative. So what I did was I put out a request for proposals, and I sent them to the folks who already get money from us and posted on our website and on Facebook and what have you, and said, I talked about what Getting Off the List is. I shared information on what those lists are, and that is from the county health rankings. And we said we are soliciting proposals from those of you who are doing things that more directly can help us to get off one or more of these lists. So we put that out, and we received 23 proposals for a total request. I also said that it will be a cap of $25,000. There'll be no more than $25,000 allocated per request. And so we received requests in total of $473,500. My recommendation is that we block, or we put in this, and we have in this proposed budget, $200,000 for discretionary funding. Because we received a lot more applications than honestly I anticipated, As I discussed with the Budget Committee, we will need some time to have a committee to review all of those proposals to come back and make a recommendation to you. And so currently, there's $200,000 blocked in, for discretionary funding. We will come back, it will likely be after the start of the fiscal year, and come back and make recommendations to you all on who we think should get.
You
get
have
that.
not put, and the way we've done past budgets, you have not recommended who would get what.
I have. You know, what you would see in this sheet before used to have all the other nonprofits that used to get money.
Yeah, I was looking for that list.
You're looking for that list?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're not on this list now because I'm not automatically making, now, many of them have requested, many of them
So
have.
you're putting the
submitted.
burden on the board to put Dansville in this.
No, I'll come back and make a recommendation to you. I just need you to, vote or, but, and I will say, and you may remember, I mentioned this at the retreat. There may be some who have been getting money from us for a long time that, based on our review, may not be able to make the case that they have can make a clear connection to what they do will help us get off the list. So, but certainly you will have the,
It's all list to make a determination on.
Yes, sir, absolutely. It will be your list to decide who you want to fund. You could also decide, we want to fund more than 200,000,
We can start, they meet the list requirement.
That's right, that's right. If you decide you want them on the list, it will be your list to approve.
When will we get that list?
It will be after the start of the fiscal year because we need to, we're gonna meet as a team to review those and make recommendations. We will give you copies of all the proposals. You can look at the entire list and we'll come back and make recommendations.
Because we might not agree with you.
They
Oh,
won't
yes.
be, these folks won't be getting any money at the beginning of the budget year.
That's correct, and we're notifying them of that. We're letting them know that it's gonna be a little bit of time before they know that. Okay, so that will be my recommendation on that.
I got a question.
Yeah.
I thought we were breaking out the partnership budget for partnership operations versus partnership cost at site. Are we not doing that?
Yeah, so my recommendation here now is, I think we need to look at that a little bit more, that cost at site for site-related costs. The request did include, I think it was either $20,000 or $25,000. I think we need to look at that more, so I'm not at this point recommending that. But you will see, I'm glad, I was going to point this out, but you will see for Carolinas Gateway, currently this year they're receiving $290,000. They requested $351,407. I'm recommending $310,000. You've heard from the team there, the changes that they're making in staffing. I just felt like, and I will tell you, originally I had in here what they requested. But after Linda and I saw how that budget was originally stacking up, we went back through and made cuts, not just on this list, but in some of our departments. And that's just one of them.
And we're fully funding, sorry, different question. I think that's smart. I'd like to break out site work in that, instead of them coming to us and saying, we have a stack of bills for $100,000 we need you to pay. We can go ahead and start budgeting what they're spending on that work.
I agree, and I think we need to, because it's been, only in the last couple of years has that really been a thing, if you will. I think we need to sit down and come to some agreement on what is ours to pay, what's theirs. Some of that we may choose to budget ourselves. I think we need a level of control over
Yeah.
that and not after the
Yeah.
fact, you know what I mean? So I think all of those reasons why I didn't include anything.
And then we're fully funding capital outlay for the school system this year. Have we ever met their full requests before?
No.
Not in my 30 years.
No,
But in this one, we are.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, because I had a question.
Yeah.
Not based on, I don't think we're gonna meet no full,
Edgefield
that's not been our,
Casco.
that's not been our discussion. I mean, it must have all not been, go ahead.
But I'll tell you how we're coming at it. Let me just
Okay.
start, if I could, at the top of the list, just make sure there's nothing else. So you'll see there for where I have hold for discretionary funding. Currently, the total of all those agencies, big and small, that are getting money from us now totals a little over $130,000. The total request of the 23 proposals is the 473.5. I'm recommending we block off $200,000. So ultimately, if we fund $200,000, it will be almost $70,000 more than what we're given in discretionary funds now. I'll go on down to, we talked about Caroline's Gateway Partnership. Okay, so Edgecombe Schools. So what we've been, let's talk about current expense first, which should be line, row 17 for you. So as you see, currently this year is 8.5 million and some change that we're giving in current expense. They requested the 11.2. Now, we know that there's gonna be movement of funding, right? There's funds that we historically have been sending to Nash County Schools that because of the merger, we no longer will have to send. So we've had the opportunity to then instead redirect those funds to Edgecombe Schools. It's a little over $1.6 million is what our estimate is at this point. So you'll know that in the joint meeting that we had, their request was a total of $11.2 million. That was factoring in what they'd been getting, the 8.5, the additional 1.6 and some change, they were adding that, and then another right at $1.2 million. And that was for that list of supplement increase, pay increase, that list of things. In fact, there's a copy of that page, I think, near the back of your handouts there. And so, originally what we're looking at here, you know, I've figured that we wouldn't be able to add that 1.2 extra. We just couldn't afford it. So we were looking at possibly doing maybe half of that, $500,000 of that. Again, after we went back in the last few days and just saw how high the total budget was stacking up, it would have been way too much appropriation, and we wouldn't have been able to recommend lowering the tax rate as much as I'm recommending now. So what you have now, that $10,178,225 is basically what they've gotten before, and then that 1.6 million and some change that was going to Nash County. Now, I will say, and you'll see it in later slides, you'll see that I want us to come back to that. I'd like for y'all to, let's look at the whole budget first. I'd like to come back to that because I know that that's priority. In fact, this is new since the budget committee. You know, last we talked with budget committee, I was planning at that time to recommend adding on another $500,000. So if y'all, let's think about that for a little bit and let's come back to that because I really would like to do that. I really would. But if we do it, that just means it will be $500,000. Either cut it somewhere else or $500,000 more from fund balance appropriation. Okay.
And you're talking about putting that in the school funding or the capital outlay funding?
In the current expense, that first line.
Okay.
Now,
So the capital outlay,
Mhm.
they've requested $800,000 and
Yes.
we're recommending $800,000.
Yes. And so what we're recommending there, as you'll recall, that we have two articles of taxes, I think is 40 and 42, that a certain percentage of each of those is different percentage for each one, that we're required to use for school capital funding. So out of the total of that, we pay out of that capital debt service, which is $700 and something thousand next year. Capital that we were sending to Nash County used to get counted out of that. Of course, that won't be going over there now. Then any annual capital, which has been $350,000, we count that toward, and we basically allocate that. We give them that up front. But the balance of whatever that is, and right now this year is tracking at a little over $1 million. The balance of those two sales tax articles, we are putting that into a separate fund. That's available to them. What we've told them is that we're going to hold on to it for you, but we want you to come back and talk about how you're going to prioritize your capital projects and looking at, what County merger will mean and existing buildings and all of this. We have to spend it on school capital. The law requires us to do that, but we wanted more conversation. Let's have that conversation. And so that money is still sitting there and accumulating as it comes in. what I'm recommending with this, that $800,000 is basically out of that same pot of money is to go ahead and allocate $800,000 of that. So it will be this and not, another $1 million. It'll be whatever the balance is left, to just go ahead and allocate more out of those sales tax up front. So essentially, this is net, not additional money. This is just allocating more money up front. And that felt like a mouthful saying that, so I'm sure it was a lot to hear, so please ask questions.
Question.
Are we still gonna be, sorry.
Why am I'm hearing about $5 million because of the merger that Nash would usually get, that would come to Edgecombe with the demerger.
I'm not sure. There's no number in our side of the budget that equals anywhere near 5 million. My guess, it might be federal and state money. That might be what that is. ADM, federal, low wealth funding, those other programs. My guess, that might be, but that's not our direct funding.
Okay.
Right offhand, I know that there's, that money all follows the students. So I know there's a lot of money that was going to Nash because those students will be coming to Edgecombe. I don't remember right offhand what that number is.
That's why I was trying to balance of what they're asking us for, if they're gonna get that figure of money. And we're not gonna know whether they're getting it or not, I guess.
Yeah, and we never really know what that is. It has to follow the student. The state, follows up on that. Ours is this current expense that we allocate and the capital.
Okay.
I will say in capital, also, above all of this is lottery funds, right? So you just approved an application. That sits at the state. It accumulates, until they use it. It goes into a fund of some type. They know how much is there. And then when they have a project, they have to approve it, you have to approve it, and then they draw it down from that. So they'll get this signed document from us, and then, Linda will get it to them, and then they'll draw that money. I don't remember how much it was. They'll draw it down.
1.3 million, wasn't it?
The last figure that we got was that there's an accumulation of $1.3 million. So that's important for us to know, because we saw a long list of capital needs at that, and I understand that. It's a lot of work that needs to be done, just like it is for us. But we need to fully understand all of the resources that are available to help tackle that. Some of that is what we provide from our general fund that's basically put into because of this sales tax, right? And then there, and that total sales tax, this $800,000, there will probably be another $800,000 or so just in next year. That's not counting what's already accumulating now. So that's accumulating that. They use that to tackle that, and then the state lottery funds, that money is being put into that all of the time. So now I will say, for just to be realistic, if you add all of that up, it's certainly not enough to tackle all of that at one time, which is never possible to do. But there are funds available to us and them, and that's why it's important. And I think, and I really appreciate the superintendent and the board and you all for the spirit of working together, and because we're having to make these difficult decisions, but I think we've done it in a spirit of cooperation. And all of this is all hard enough. It certainly would be much more difficult if we were at each other every time we sat down to talk about these things. Also, just to keep it on our radar, we know that in addition to these things, that long list of capital needs, we're bringing in 4 new buildings, that there will be a decision made about ultimately what do we do about school facilities. Is there a new high school or what? I think they're getting pretty close to getting that study done on the facilities and capacity and student makeup and all of that. As that's going to inform them as to the decisions they will make, and in conjunction with us to some degree about how they handle all that. There is still available to us the needs-based school capital fund that is lottery funded but separate from this lottery fund, that there's money available to build a school, but or can be used to do renovations to schools. We have not tapped into that yet, but we plan to. It's still decisions that have to be made on repairing existing schools. Do we build another school? How do we handle all of that? And I know that will be of great interest to us and a lot of people. And I know we'd all love to be able to get to that decision as quickly as possible. But I certainly understand, especially on the school system side, that there's a lot of information gathering that's needed to make an informed decision. And so I applaud them for taking this approach to get that independent, data-driven study done so that they and we can make informed decisions on that. So for all outside agencies, if you look down, well, since we're talking about schools, I do need to mention. So you'll see the only thing we're budgeting for Nash County Schools is $550,000 for current expense. I think we might have talked about this recently, but so right now that is totally driven by how many students, Edgecombe County residents that stay in Nash County Schools, and then how many are in Edgecombe schools. The transition plan that we all approved said that the way that number is to be determined is to look at the per pupil allocation on the Edgecombe County side. So wherever we land with that current expense number, 10.1 million or whatever it is, we will divide that by the number of students in Edgecombe schools. We'll get a per pupil number. And then we will look at how many students of ours will remain in Nash County schools, and we just multiply that per pupil number by that number. And so right now, this is really a high estimate, because the last we checked of the students that filled out the survey that Nash Schools put out, I think it was 191 indicated that they plan to stay in Nash County School. Because we're talking about 10th through 12th grade, we were expecting many more than that. I think they just didn't get a good response. There's still a lot of people that haven't indicated where they plan to go. So that number is going to be fluid. But before you all adopt this budget before the end of June, we have to have a number. Right now, I'm leaving it at 550. What I have sent to the group, as a committee of us that have been meeting, for over a year, and we were talking about transition. And I talked with Dr. Brian about this before I sent out the suggestion, is that we all plug a number in here by the time we adopt our respective budgets before the end of June. But then what we do is, after the start of the fiscal year, schools, when they look at their ADM, they call it average daily membership, they do a count at 10 days and then a final count at 20, and whatever that count is, sets their ADM for the rest of the year. I recommend that we take that same approach. We get their ADM by that 20th day, and however many students it says that was Edgecombe residents going to Nash County Schools, that's how we budget. So we're going to have a number here. Right now it's the 550. Unless we get some better updated numbers before you adopt the budget, if we do, we will change this. But ultimately, right now, everybody seems to, at least the ones who've responded, in agreement for us to take that approach.
So part of my question there is, if it's above 550, it'll come, because we're just moving those funds, it'll come from the Edgecombe County appropriation.
That's correct.
As opposed to from a fund balance.
That's right, and vice versa if it's the
Yeah.
other way. Yes, sir. So it won't be.
Just to clarify, that's
Yes.
the plan.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. That's a good point.
It's beyond me, but they have no clue, and we won't get a number until after those 20 days. But we're also only going to fund per pupil, what we pay for Edgecombe County students, not the
Yes.
difference between what Nash County says.
That's correct.
Like in the past.
That's correct.
Not yapping.
That's correct.
Exactly.
I believe that was all I wanted to point out, but happy to answer any questions you might have on any other outside agencies. So just sort of a summary of capital improvements included, recommended here in the budget. There'll be additional, what I'm calling new funding of $950,000, almost $916,000. When we look at the spreadsheet, and I specifically say new funding, there are a couple of items that are budgeted this year that either the vehicle's not come in or the particular repair hasn't been done, that we're gonna roll that, so it'll be on top of this, but I just want to show that this will be new funding, not currently appropriated. So comparing that to the original CIP of this current year's, an increase of $57,883. And then we want to talk about the strategic use of debt for capital projects, equipment, and animal shelter. So if you will, you have this spreadsheet here in your packet. You've seen this layout before us, a few minor changes to it. So what this is, this shows every department that has requested a capital purchase being $5,000 or more, and it has a useful life of more than a year. And so they range from relatively small purchases to larger purchases. If you look to the far right, you'll see in columns M, N, and O, that's A, B, and C. What we've asked the department heads to do is, if you got a lot of capital purchases, a lot of capital improvements you feel like needs to be made, we need you to prioritize those. You know, A being obviously the highest priority, then B and C. Most of your departments have relatively few capital items they're requesting, so most of them only have things that fall in column A. But if you look at that M, N, and O all the way down, that's what everyone has requested in their budget. Now if you go from column M back to the left, you'll see we've broken those down between grounds, vehicles, and equipment, just to show the different categories. Now if you look at column G is what I'm recommending and it's what we have included in the budget for capital outlay for FY25. Column F in the green, those are things I am recommending, but it's some other funding source that's paying for that. For example, if you look near the bottom of that first page, that $75,000 emergency vehicle, I'm recommending we purchase that, but that is that is state funding for the additional fire protection at Kingsborough that's available that we're going to use for that. Okay? And then in column E, which is in the yellow, those are things that I'm recommending that we consider borrowing money to purchase or pay for. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Column D is something that I absolutely believe, things that I think we need, but we're going to hold until we see if and when we get that Medicaid cost settlement money. And I'll just go ahead and point out those two items there is $360,000 for a new ambulance in emergency services. And then on page 3, that $40,250 is replacing dental equipment in one of our dental rooms over in the Human Services building. Need it, we can use those Medicaid cost settlement funds. I recommend we not budget it now. When those funds come in, we can then bring it back for your consideration to appropriate. And then column C, those are things that are currently budgeted, but we won't be able to expend those monies, but those are things that we still need. And so I'm recommending we roll those forward, okay? So for example, in planning and inspections, first of all, in all of our departments, it's been very difficult to get vehicles. A couple of years behind it is nearly impossible to get vehicles. It has started to pick up some now, but we've not been able to get that truck in planning. And then there's one in the health department. Currently budgeted, we were hoping it would come through. We get promises from the vendors, I think it's coming in such and such time, and then it says it's delayed for whatever reason. The other thing that I'll point out that is in that, and that you'll see that on the second page, and that is the $500,000, the elevator modernization in the Human Services building. You'll recall that you approved an amended capital project ordinance that spoke to that. If you look on page 3 in that same column C, I mentioned the truck there in the health department. And solid waste, there were some funds that we had originally put in to lease equipment, to lease an excavator, but we've repurposed that to replace one of our convenience site buildings that's in desperate need of repair. We may be able to get a couple of those out of that, so recommending that we roll that forward. So, you know, I'd be happy to go through the detailed list of these if you want to discuss, you know, what we're planning to do in each of the departments. You'll see the busiest one there is on page 2 in buildings and grounds. You know, we've been able to do a lot of work over the last few years. You saw a presentation at your retreat from Stan Liverman, our maintenance director, on a lot of great things we've been able to do. ARPA funding helped us to do some things otherwise, you know, we likely would have had to kick down the road for a little while longer. But as you saw in that last presentation we did at your last commissioners meeting, we own a lot of buildings and a lot of them still need some work done. And so you'll see a number of items there. And before we go into talking about debt, do you have any questions about any of these items here? And certainly you're welcome to take this with you and study it. And if you have any follow-up questions about any of this, don't hesitate to ask. See any change you feel like we need to make?
I have some questions, but it's about the ones that you're asking for possible financing. So do you want me to wait until you discuss that?
If you don't mind. Okay, so now let's talk about strategic use of debt. So in looking at this list, in looking at you know, the priorities of some things we need done in our buildings, equipment that's needed, you know, though we hope to be able to do an elevator, or we will be doing an elevator with some residual ARPA-enabled funds. You know, we still have a, you know, you heard Stan talk about that elevator over the courthouse. We've got 2 elevators here. These don't go down as much as those do, but they go down from time to time. Ultimately, they all have to be fixed. And a number of other things. And, you know, every year we make a decision, okay, what are we going to do and what are we going to kick down the road and just say our prayers and keep our fingers crossed. But some of these items I fear continuing to push down the road. And so that's why we spent some time, and also not just in buildings and grounds, in solid waste. You know, we've got aged heavy equipment out there that we are band-aiding, and all of them, we're really getting to the point that we're spending more money keeping them running than really they are worth. But we got to have them going. You know, every now and then we'll have like maybe the loader at the transfer station that goes down, and we have to shut down the transfer station that afternoon until we can get it. You know, so it's more and more. So just looking at all the accumulation of these things, you know, made me think we at least need to consider this. So, you know, we didn't just jump into this idea lightly, and we really thought it through. We got, you know, our friends over at Davenport and Company to sit down and talk through this with us. But first, I just sort of want you to understand sort of the thought behind why I would even bring this to you. So you'll see in that slide, why should we consider issuing debt? And it should be FY25, sorry. Well, first of all, as I mentioned, we have an accumulation of critical capital needs that are beyond our ability to pay outright. Secondly, we can take on additional debt and remain within our key debt policies, that being the 10-year debt payout, debt to assessed value ratio, and debt service to expenditures ratio. And we will have some debt service step downs over the next 4 years, which, you know, we've been sort of keeping an eye on that in those reports that you usually see at your retreat. So that sort of opens the capacity for us to be able to afford some additional debt, I believe. So how might we strategically use debt? So first of all, we know we've been talking about animal shelter for a while. We're working on a $4 million total estimated budget for building the animal shelter. We are getting, the architect is getting very close to finalizing those plans so that they can be bid out. They have a meeting soon. We have a meeting Monday. Have a meeting Monday to go back over those to make sure that everybody feels good about where we are. We have some money from the state appropriation from last year that's designated for this. You all have agreed to take $1 million from the proceeds of the sale of our interest in the property in Rocky Mount to go towards this. So this leaves a little over $2 million of that $4 million that we'll either have to pay or we have to borrow money. So we got the animal shelter and then all of these other critical capital needs that we've talked about. Building, repair, renovation, heavy equipment, of that $1.9 million, what that is. So between the 2.2 and the 1.9. And so in talking with Davenport, they've looked at right around, they're seeing borrowers getting, counties and towns getting around 5% for a 20-year fixed. So just to make sure we build in case we decide we want to do more, the working number we're using is $4.6 million in debt. So debt service on that over a 20-year fix is right at $460,000. First year, of course, that changes year to year. We can schedule the first payment to begin in FY26 if we need to give us a little bit more time to get to that wider window of some available funds because of the step downs in our debt service. And if we go no longer than a 20-year term, we will stay within our fiscal policies. And I do want to point that out to you. So you have in your packet a copy of this analysis that Davenport has done for us. And I won't go through this page by page, but I do want to point out to you a few things. You'll see it. It looks like everybody has it. Okay. So it says debt service comparisons on the top. So if you look at page 3, and the page numbers are at the bottom right of your of the page. Make sure we're all okay. The bottom right of your page, you'll see page 3. You'll see at the top. This looks at all of our current debt. You'll see the total at the top. Principal 22.8, interest 3.7 for a total 26.5 million in debt. If you turn over to page 4, so on page 4, what they're looking at our standings with our debt policies or our financial policies currently. So over on the left side, one of the measurements we look at is 10-year payout. So our policy says that that in 10 years we want to be able to pay out 60% of our debt in 10 years. You'll see currently as of FY24, in 10 years we're scheduled to pay off 95.7%. So that's good. More is better. We're paying it off faster than what our policy says. If you look there in the middle, debt to assessed value. Our policy says that our debt to assessed value ratio should be no more than 1.75%. We are currently at 0.65%, so less is better in this case. So we're doing okay there. We're doing good actually there. And then finally, debt service to expenditures. You'll see that our fiscal policy says that our debt service to expenditure ratio should be no more than 15%, and we are at 6.22%. So we're well, within our thresholds for all of that. If you look at page 5, you'll see, of course, column A are fiscal years, B, C, and D, existing debt, and then column D is total debt service. So you'll see how those, as I showed in that slide, the slide I just showed you, how our debt service is stepping down. You'll see that played out there in column D. Current year is 3.48, next year 3.4, so it's going down by year. And now let me take you over to page 7. So on page 7, on the left-hand side, they have summarized the projects that we gave to them. And I know, Mr. Thorne, you want to come back and talk about some of those that we have on that list. But they've summarized that at just under 4.2, just to provide cushion, just in case there are other things we want to put in. I've shared with you, they're working with and there will be some cost of issuance as well. They're working with a 4.6 total amount. You'll see that on the right-hand side. They're running 4 scenarios, a 15-year direct bank loan, 20-year direct bank, 30-year USDA, and 40-year USDA. So if you look over on page 8, you'll see they show those 4 scenarios there, 15-year maturity, 20-year maturity, 30-year maturity with USDA, and 40-year maturity USDA. For purpose of our discussion, I want to focus on the 20-year maturity, and you'll see why in just a minute. But you'll see that first year starting in 26 be between principal and interest for $4.6 million is $460,000. Now, if you look over on page 9, this is where they're checking to see if we did any of this, taking any of these options, what will it mean for us as far as staying within those guidelines that we have. So again, looking at, if you look at D and E, we will be, within those physical policies that we have in either the 15-year bank loan or the 20-year bank loan. But you'll see if we go to 30 or 40 years, we will be outside of the parameters for our 10-year debt, 10-year payoff that we are shooting for of 60%. And so my recommendation is that we look at that 20-year payout. And then they've got, detailed information behind all of that. So that's sort of what we're looking at and what we recommend. And so now to your question, Commissioner.
Yeah, I don't think, if we're talking about projects, and I don't know if this is going to be a part of your recommendation when we adopt the budget, that these are the specific projects that we do this for. But if we're looking at contracts for the 1912 building, I'd hate to put $550,000 of debt on a building that we're looking at potentially selling.
Right. There's a question mark.
I'd rather
beside that.
sell it without the debt and sell it at a lower price than have debt on it that we're trying to then offset the debt.
And that's a good point. Yes, we have someone that has made an offer on the 1912 building. Of course, you probably remember that's the building right next to, connected to the Human Services building, 3-story building. We've not used it much. We used the first floor for a little bit of storage. We've had people interested in that over the years. We have someone who's made an offer. The reason I haven't brought that to you because I still feel like we need to have some more discussion on the potential, joint uses of these buildings that are connected. Because y'all may have been in the building before. They're separate buildings, but they're connected. They're joined at a wall. They share utilities. They share some elevators.
You got one electric meter too?
One electric meter for both buildings. And water, right. And I think those things that probably could be worked through. The larger concern is for the 1912 building, the only handicap access is through the Human Services building. And again, these might not be things that we can't have a way to work around. I needed some more time to really think about that, so Mike and Stanley met with the proposer last week, or you met with them, and went through and kind of talked through, hey, we're not sure if this can work. What do you think? It has some good conversation. And so I believe we may be able to work past that. And so we're going to have a follow-up meeting with the offer. And so that may be something, an offer that I bring back to you. We will, as the other one, we will have an appraisal done on that. But to your point, yes, sir, absolutely. If we accept this offer and sell it, the buyer is well aware of all the work that needs to be done. And so that's what come off this list, yes, sir.
Sounds like a problem sale to me, as it relates to the dual use of facilities, and they've got to have access to the building at times different than ours.
Possibly
Yeah,
so.
but, I mean, you would separate the properties. I mean, part of that sale would not be that they would have access to our
It says
top floor building. I mean, you would have a wall that would be installed, I would assume.
Well,
he said that
the only handicap access to the 1912 is through the Human Services Building. So, there would have to be some joint use
some
of that.
modifications,
that
and some
common space,
modifications to
right.
accommodate that
Yeah.
in terms of what he's saying. I think that's the way, if we're gonna bring it, we need to see how they can use the handicap access and not have access to our building
That's right.
when we're not there.
That's right.
I see it as a problem, but if we can work out a problem, it'd be a good one. Okay.
Right.
It also depends upon what they propose to put there.
Right, and right now, from my understanding, they're looking at doing both some type of restaurant, coffee shop, or something like that on the first floor, and then the second and third leasing apartment space. I'm not sure if it's either
So,
short stay or long term, but it would be a dual use.
in staff's thinking, you don't see any use of that building by the county, any purpose that we could.
Well, that's a good question, Mr.
Before we even get in, is there anything that potentially that we're gonna need space for in the next 3-4 years?
That's a very good question, and it's been another part of my hesitation. We do need some space. Like in this building, we are pretty much out of space. There's a little bit that we can find in the Human Services Building with some changes, maybe putting up some walls. We probably could use a little bit. We don't have a need for 3 floors. We don't have a need for.
Wow, no, just a thought.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I thought at one time maybe, ideal use would be we use some of the space, maybe some of our partners who partner with us in human services, whether it be nonprofits that we often refer to or they refer to us, could jointly use. I just don't see that we'll need 3 floors of a building there. So there are pluses and minuses on both sides. There's a lot, if we're gonna keep it, there's a lot of money we need to spend to stabilize that building.
Is this, have we built out this building fully, the building we're in? Is this building is 100% used?
Yes, sir.
Everything, all space?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, we might have a office or two that's open, it's only because the position is open as soon as it's filled. You've heard me mention that our career navigator and our new planning director, they're working remotely because we have no space in this building. So we're looking at some opportunities in the Human Services Building where we may be able to move some things and make some space available. I could use a little bit of that space in the 1912, but at this point, we don't need 3 floors of it. No, sir. Parking is always tricky down here downtown. We're very stingy with our parking because we don't have enough as it is. So that's one of the things we'll have to look through, but we're aware of that, and that's part of the conversation that we've been having. So this list, before we finalize it, yes, sir, will likely change.
Okay. The next question I had is the elevator courthouse. I know that there's been a lot of requests for updates to that courthouse and expansions to that courthouse. Is it possible that we could kind of loop that elevator in with those requests from the state where we don't necessarily, we could kind of, it's my understanding that there's going to be some state discussion around those expansions of the courthouse here.
Sure, absolutely. If we get some intel that we see some money coming our way from the state, we'll definitely move that into it. And depending on how we can use that money, there are a few other things that we have in here that we are recommending to budget, like some additional counter space or counters for security in clerk's office, both sides, civil and criminal. And I can't remember what else right offhand, but there might be some other things. But I will say, we met with the court officials a few weeks ago, and we've been meeting on a fairly regular basis, having good conversation. Our position has been, we're going to do as much as we can. You help us figure out what the priorities are. We can't do them all at the same time. Help us figure out what the priorities are. We've as y'all have seen, we have tried to be fairly consistent over the last 4 or 5 years to budget something. And we've done, we just spent, I forgot how much, we just did some painting and stuff and power washed outside of the courthouse. Been doing some work on the inside, so we're trying to keep that trend. They came still with the long list, but all of them have talked about we are out of space in that courthouse. And, what I've said to them is that is a fix that's beyond anything that we can appropriate in an annual budget. But it's something we're actually aware of. We're I reminded them that at that time, we had not contracted with this new lobbyist, but I told them we were looking at that and be something we'll continue to
Do
pursue.
you get facility costs from the state for the court, based on them handling cases? Then there's some fees that come back to the court.
There's some fees, but I think that goes back more operational things, like some of that goes to the sheriff's office, but no capital. We get no capital from the state. So,
Sorry, last question. Around debt, do we have the fund balance, Ms. Barfield?
Yes, the current, as of today, is $8,885,744.
I don't know, I just wrote 8.5. 8.85.
8.8.
Any other questions about, so, if you still need to think about it a little bit, that's fine, but any immediate reactions, any of just totally opposed to thinking about debt, want us to at least continue to pursue the possibility of that?
Well, I don't think you need to take it out of your consideration. It's something I think you need to look at, and and those things that you see that we need, and we'll make that decision, when and if you bring it, okay, in terms of, and consider, keep it up front
Yes, sir.
as you're talking to us, so we can make the considerations as we go. That would be my thinking on it.
Specifically that animal
And I-
shelter.
I was about to say, I think the board needs to
I'm about
come
tired of
to
hearing
come to
about
senses
that
that we're gonna have to finance that animal shelter.
one. Exactly.
And
Do what we gotta
that would be the number one priority.
It is for me.
So if that's the number one priority, then that's certainly you need to move forward with the consideration on financing.
I thought there was financing available through the USDA for that. Did I just dream that?
No, it is, and that's option 3 and 4, 30-year and 40-year. The reason that we're recommending not going that route, because that would push us past our threshold for debt payout. We certainly.
If we did all 4 projects, it would.
That's right.
Not only if we did that one, would it?
If we just broke out that one.
If we just did that one, it would not, for 40 years, would it push it past it?
No, if we just did the animal shelter,
It
it
depends
likely
upon
wouldn't.
how
push it.
much of that we do.
That's right, that depends on that. And so either way,
So
whether
if we
we.
staggered in terms of, as we were able to do that, we still might be able to do the 40-year.
Yes, sir,
Oh.
we could. Now, certainly, that will give you some more breathing room on cash flow with debt service annually. I will say, as we continue to sort of, consider this, and one of the things we need to think about, whether it be just the animal shelter or the animal shelter and some of these other things, either way, we'll have to go to the LGC.
Right.
And so, as I mentioned, we'll soon be wrapping up the specs for the animal shelter. It'd be my recommendation that if you're still, at that point, remain open to considering animal shelter plus some of these other things, the recommendation is that we take it all to the LGC at one time, okay? So we will have to bid out the work of the animal shelter and then these other things. We will look at this list, see where we settle. Some of these, it will make sense to bid together as a package. Some of them will have to be separate depending on what it is. Some of it will be just getting quotes, like the equipment, getting 3 quotes for the equipment. But we'll have to have all of that together and ready before we sit down with the LGC. We have to be ready for that. We have to put in an application to go before them the month before going before them. So we'll coordinate all of that, and we've talked through that with Davenport, so we'll be laying all of that and be prepared. So we'll just continue to have this conversation. Right now, there's no In the budget that's presented to you, there's no budget impact related to any of this, because we're factoring in that if we do this, we likely won't have our first payment until FY '26.
Well, what I'm hearing here from the board is you need, based on the need for the animal shelter, even if we got to do the time frames that you stated, which would be the 20-year, is that you need to proceed. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Be
in-
ready.
in stating, proceed to do this within the time frame you recommend.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any different instructions to give the manager? Hearing none, you've got your marching orders on that.
Thank
Okay.
What is the rate with the USDA for the animal shelter?
Was it five? No.
It won't be much better than what we're getting from the bank rate, I don't think. It won't be.
And we-
But they require 40-year payouts. They don't do 20-year payouts.
They either do 30 or 40.
They don't do the 20, okay.
Yes, sir.
But it won't be much better.
I guess we're not proposing an excavator at 20-year payout, right? I mean, that's going to be like a 5 or 7 year loan. So, I mean, we're not packaging all these are going to be individual loans. We're not going to do them as one loan, right? I mean,
Right now, we're considering that, yes.
and would a bank do that? I mean, would they just
I mean, 'cause-
attach collateral to everything?
Yeah, because these excavators they have a long life. They can have a long.
I understand that. I mean, I finance excavators, but I've never financed an excavator on a 20-year loan.
Right.
Not the
You-
county.
You've done one.
It
you've done
just
one
happened to
a
fall into what we-
government, for a government.
We
or-
forbid it, but it's usually 5 to 7 years. That would be is you could stagger out the
Sure,
debt.
we'll
proposal.
certainly look at that.
We'll look at the three and find another means for doing the heavy equipment.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll help you.
Go on down to his
What-
bank,
whatever-
get
whatever the-
$370,000.
Whatever the strategy
I
is,
should get that
At
discount.
Yeah.
5%, no way.
it's more than, I ain't brought
That's
no-
interest rate, right? I mean, that's savings interest rate right now.
I ain't got no credit, I ain't brought no money 30 years, I don't get.
That's your point.
I'm a high risk.
That would be the way I would look at it. I wouldn't, I think you could stagger out some of these into different terms as opposed to just saying blanket 20-year terms.
That's a good point. Thank you for that.
It's-
Makes sense.
Make a note of
What time had you, scheduled for lunch?
that. What time?
Oh, they're not here yet, okay. Okay, well,
We almost done.
it's,
I think
we got
we're pretty good.
three
Almost
folks
done.
over here over 60. So it's time to eat and bathroom breaks, okay?
You saw me get up, didn't you? I'm 65. You saw me get up.
Well,
So we're almost finished, right?
yeah, I'm not too far from the end.
Right. So you can take your time, eat your lunch after we
No, the
finish.
chef said he finished. I got this guy, let's eat, okay? Well, go ahead.
So we'll talk about enterprise funds there really in utilities, water and sewer. There's no rate increase currently needed. We've not gotten any word of our two suppliers, Rocky Mountain and Tarboro, doing any rate increases. If something comes up and they do send us a rate increase, we'll take a look at that and determine whether or not, we likely will need to do one. Revenues are continuing to cover expenditures in water and sewer. In solid waste, regional landfill in Bertie County with Public Services, we just got a letter from them about a week ago that they are going up on their rates by a little over 5%. And of course, that contract is both for their tipping fees and the hauling and the cost of hauling it. They haul it as well. And so we're recommending increase of our rate of $4 per ton on municipal solid waste. So that'll take us from $71 to $75. We hate to have to do that. We're already having to appropriate money from general fund into solid waste. You'll see even with that, we're being conservative both ways, but we're currently in this budget is a budget of transfer of $756 to $17. I was thinking the other day, these are two enterprise funds, meaning for the public that might happen to be listening, watching. These are services we're not required to provide as a county. We choose to provide them as a service to our citizens because, there's not it being provided in such a grand way by some private provider. And so, but in doing that, we're not to use general fund to to cover the cost of this. We're supposed to cover it by revenues in that. And I was just thinking, how is it that over the years we've, it used to be we had to put some money into water and sewer, but, over the years we've been able to turn that tide and now we're operating in the black. In fact, we've been able to put some money into fund balance, so now there are things we're doing like purchasing meters that we're not having to borrow money for. That's in fund balance. So how haven't we been able to get to that? I was trying to think, what's the difference? And really the difference is in water and sewer, we have a lot of grant money that's available to us. Through USDA, Community Development Block Grant Funds, Golden Leaf. We've been fortunate to have a lot of grant funds available to us where we have been able to put in a lot of our infrastructure with a lot of grant money. So it brings down our capital cost. Debt service, we do have debt in our utility system, but certainly not to the amount that we otherwise would have. And so we've been able to, I think, have a reasonable water and sewer rates. Some of our citizens may not agree with that, but we've been able to operate, as I mentioned, ahead of expenditure so we can build up some funds to be able to because now our system is at the point where we need meters replaced and other things. So we're very fortunate. In fact, Mike and I were at Town of Princeville's retreat just this past Saturday. They wanted to hear talk about the District 6 project. Now, that originally started off as about 40% grant, was it, Mike? 40, 60 grant, 60% loan. Now it's 70, 30, 70% grant. Some additional funds came available. We just don't have, there are some grant funds we get for a few things in solid waste, but nothing like that. So it's a necessary service, but it has been one, we're going to continue to work on that. As you know, you'll recall I did put one position in reserve there. That's a truck driver position in reserve there, and trying to minimize cost as much as possible there. Other budget considerations, I'll mention that our Edgecombe Works initiatives, you heard Dr. McLeod give you an update on that recently. I've included the continued funding of those programs in this budget. School resource officers, that in my mind has always been a need and a priority for additional SROs. I think it elevated, probably in all of our minds, after our last joint meeting with the school board of how much that's needed. And so right now, all of that is being paid for by state funds that go to the school system, and the school system pays for those SROs. The sheriff in our budget meeting has said ultimately he feels like he needs 8 additional school resource officers. I certainly understand that. Some schools you have one, some they're splitting time. Some schools, ultimately, you may need more than one, especially for the larger schools like the high schools. I totally understand that. And so we've looked at what it would cost for 4 of those 8, and it's around $272,000. We have not budgeted that in this draft budget. What I recommend that we do is, he and the superintendent have been talking about that. They're going to see if there are additional state funds that may come available. All the school systems are looking for that. If there are some additional state funds to come available, let's let that cover some of those costs first. But I will say I did want to bring that up and put it on your radar. If those don't come through, I believe this is something we need to come back and take another look at. Building security, and that is our own buildings. That is something that we've been talking about internally for a long time. Unfortunately, we live in a day and time now where, you just see things happening, especially in public buildings. And it's always been that, but, I think all of us have seen, whether directly or we hear about it, it just seems that kind of concern has grown and it continues to grow. I know in this building, obviously this is the one that I work in, and I'm more familiar with the incidents that happen in here. I've seen those incidences increase. Incidences of not just irate customers, I'm talking about to the point of being belligerent. We had someone in this building about a month ago, was downstairs taking his shirt off, inviting staff to come fight, you know. And that thought lingers in an employee's mind, some more than others, and it makes them feel worried about working in a public situation. Now, I will say, and thank you all for agreeing to the money that we've spent to do some things to help improve our security. You know, we have counter spaces and doors that stop where we didn't have before. We've got more and more key fob access to certain places. We just did some more of that here recently. I forgot how much we spent on that, and those help. But we're still a public building. You still can't always put a glass door or a counter between us and our citizens, and it's just scary times. So, the Sheriff Atkinson and I have been talking about this for a while. I think the best service we can get if we were to have security in our buildings would be for his staff to do it. And, you know, it would be his staff that they're off duty and they're doing it and they're working overtime to do it. Right now, because of other assignments, what I'd like to have, I'd love to have 40 hours a week in our 4 main buildings. This building, Human Services, Health in Rocky Mount, DSS in Rocky Mount. There's still other buildings we have, but that would be our 4 main buildings. And so, in talking with the sheriff, he's very much willing to do it. He has limited staff available to do that because of some vacancies, but also because of assignments and doing other things. And so what we've talked about is that he feels like he could cover the equivalent of 40 hours a week, and they would likely probably split time between this building and maybe the Human Service. We'll have to work out the details of that. And so cost all in, we're estimating that to be $173,000. That is in this proposed budget that you have before you.
Need to add a 0.
Yes, ma'am, sure do. That would be 17,000. That wouldn't be enough, would it? Thank you on that. I did that on purpose. I want to see if you.
Sure.
Thank you.
We can count money. We might not be able to count off, so we can count money.
Any comments on that? It appears that
That's a good idea.
you got no opposition on it.
All right, thank you.
Right
That's
now.
just for 2.
That's just for 2. Yes, that's just for 2. And that's factoring in, they will be time and a half because they'll be working off duty from their regular sheriff's assignments.
Are we adding 2 officers?
No, not adding to. These would be
We'll use
existing
existing
staff
staff.
who would be working, getting
Existing.
paid overtime for covering this. Other
I'm
budget.
almost in favor of adding staff. I mean, why don't we just add 2 positions?
I think the problem is the difficulty in finding the staff. I mean, sheriff already has difficulty in, not as much as before, in filling some positions. We prefer to go that route. We just felt like it'd be difficult to hire the additional staff.
But if we hired the 2 additional staff, we still would have, we still have the same problem. Because if they own staff and there's assignment of other, the priorities assignment, still gonna have to have overtime officers. So I think in terms of for funding, I don't mind funding them, but we still would have to use, unless they are they're not gonna be just assigned this duty.
I think you could. I mean, you could treat it like an SRO. You could just say that they're a county building.
But, you know, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that'll happen. Not if we given 2 deputies, I doubt seriously if they're gonna just be assigned.
You draw them from the same pool, so somebody's gonna end up having overtime.
Yeah, it's going to be overtime. I don't know whether, I think for SROs, we using mostly a lot of retirees. So that's really,
Yeah, this proposal would be full-time SROs, not retirees,
Right.
in that proposal.
That's right.
which, however you do it is all right, okay? However you do it is all right, okay?
And to your point, it would be ideal if we could hire, because it wouldn't be time and a half, it would just straight time.
Right. you can
But
do
there would be
3
the difficulty. Now, I will say, we've got this budgeted, we'll circle back if we see that they can be full-time and not folks working overtime, then we will revisit.
Because that's the clarification on the SROs, is that those are full-time deputies,
That's
not
right.
retiree.
That's right. The
retired
8 that
deputies.
he said that he needs would be not just folks working overtime or retirees, be new staff. So that budget number, at 272, is for full-time folks.
And I guess I would, which I don't, really sure how he used them, but, just for specific duties, is, I think it's flexibility over there. Go ahead, but that's what we're doing. Okay.
Let's look at it.
Okay. I do, in talking about our compensation plan, you know, one of the reasons we were looking at years of service is that, you know, our compensation plan is two sides of what you're trying to do. You're trying to have a competitive compensation plan where you both can attract staff, but also on the other side, you want to retain staff. So, you know, part of us analyzing our compensation plan over the last year plus, we've been looking at what can we do on both sides. And so, you know, certainly wish that we could do more for our existing staff, something as an incentive to, you know, to get them to, we got to get them here, but then we got to encourage them to stay. One of the things that actually the team brought to our attention is looking at considering increasing our longevity percentages. Right now, at 5 years, it starts at 2.5%, so perhaps moving at that up to 3% and 0.5% for each of those. I've not budgeted that. What I recommend is that I want it to be on your radar because I want you to know we're thinking about that. I would suggest we revisit that mid-year to see where we are at budget. At that time, we can bring you some numbers back and see what we think it will cost us. But I just want to lay that out there as a possibility.
What is it now? You said 5 years or 2.5?
Starting at 5 years is 2.5, and then it goes up.
10, what it goes, 5, 10, 15, 20, like that?
2.5 and 4, and I think it's 4.5 or 5.
He's talking about the years.
So I'm talking about years.
Years of service.
We pay for,
Every 5 years it goes up.
every 5 years, the first,
5, 10.
so when you get 5, you get the 2.5 till you get to 10.
Yes, sir.
Go up to 3, then it go up to what?
Go up to 3.
And then the highest is 6%?
The highest percentage we pay for longevity is 6%.
6%, yes, sir.
Well, I really think it's something we need to look at in this budget. I really do. I think we're really not paying any longevity. When you get your money, your tax get out, you look at it and nothing. So I'm not hearing from the rest of the board. That's just my speaking. But longevity, it is an incentive to. I would suggest looking at it. Rest of the board and pick it. I'm supportive of longevity.
Okay.
And we really started much too low. Okay. But whatever the board.
What's the rate for other folks at longevity?
I think
About the
that,
same thing.
My
with
wife
state.
drew 3%, I think.
Yeah.
well, I think when I was working, and that's 30 years ago, I was at 5, 10, 15, 20,
But what?
They used to pay
how
y'all
much
a lot of money.
increase? What'd you get at 5, what'd you get at 10?
5%.
You got 5%, well, that's because you work with the state.
Yeah, I'm saying that, yeah.
This is the county, we're poor.
Where they make the money at.
Well, we want to act poor, but we're not a poor county. We might be low, no, we're low wealth county,
61% of the people on Medicare.
but we're a low wealth county. We are.
Yeah.
I grew up with nothing, but I never grew up with poor until somebody told me I didn't have nothing. I never. But we
I think we
need
could
to
consider
get
that
our
half a
pay
percentage.
at least in order that we can do a better job of recruiting and keeping them. So I'm seeing anything when it comes to the pay that we can increase the pay of our staff is there, but we use different terms, Mr. Baldwin.
Well, I mean, I don't have any problem with it, but I'm trying to find out where we are compared to Nash or whatever.
Well, let's look at that.
Well,
I won't compare apples to apples.
I'll share what happened. Y'all asked that question at the budget committee. In
Right.
fact, Mike Google and pull some numbers down. Martin County, they don't do a percentage. They do a flat amount. $300, $400, $500, $600, $700. Halifax County starts at 2% and ends at 4%. Pitt
The top
County,
rate when they get, it's,
4%, yes, sir. Pitt County starts at 1.5% and they end at 4.5%. Wilson County starts at 2.5% and ends at 5%.
So we
Well,
doing
that-
pretty good. We
Better than
doing good.
everybody.
Well, let's,
I don't
let's,
mind looking at it.
Let-
I'm all for looking at it.
let's be at the top of that list.
Yeah.
Sounded like we are right now.
Okay, in terms of,
Right.
let's get a percent or a half percent above all, let's get at the top of that.
See what it costs.
Yeah, bring us back a cost on that.
Yes, sir, we'll bring that back.
And bring that back for this budget.
Yes, sir, sure will. Thank you for that. 3 fire departments are requesting an increase to their fire tax. You'll see as West Edgecombe from 6 to 9, Speed 9 to 12, Whitaker's at 8.5 to 10. Discussed that with the budget committee. The budget committee's recommendation is that we should hold that. Let's let them see what revow new tax rate does for them. And then if they still want to reconsider and bring that back for our consideration, they certainly can have the opportunity to do that.
Well, have you told them that you will not be recommending it to them?
No, sir, not yet.
I talked to our local people and told them let's hold off and see what Reval was gonna do, but I can tell you right now, Reval, at the tax rates you said it, is gonna give them more money than what they're asking for. But we need to find out exactly, I think, what all of them gonna come when we decide on the rate.
Sure.
Let's kind of, let's be able, I think, tell them what you're gonna do and be able to tell them what you're recommending and tell them the difference in what we proposing to set the rate at, what it would do for them.
Yeah.
And then they still might come, but then I think they need to know what you recommend.
Yes, sir.
I think they'll be satisfied, they're reasonable.
Okay. And as I mentioned before, I wanted to come back and revisit funding for schools, consideration of additional funding for supplemental increases. As I mentioned to you before, that originally I put in $500,000 to help with some of that list of that 1.2 million for supplemental increases after we saw the budget stack up in an attempt to try to lower the tax rate some, minimize fund balance appropriation, the CIP and salaries and all of that stuff. I have pulled it for now, but I want to get your feedback on it. As I said, if you want to go ahead, if you want to put that back in, I'm certainly not opposed to that. It would just mean that fund balance appropriation would go up by 500,000, or whatever the amount is that you'd like to do.
I think we're gonna have to increase the supplement because we've already hired those teachers and told them that we were gonna pay them at 11% supplement. I mean,
Well, I would say you can't change that.
Well, we didn't,
we didn't tell them that, but I mean,
we said we worked on it, yeah.
we were working on getting it to match.
Well, we went to 10%, didn't we?
We went to 10, yes, sir. We're still, as of Nash School's current,
I don't think
we're
made
1
it-
percentage point behind.
We
it.
made a commitment to go to 10.
We're already, they're
We're
already
at
at
10.
10.
Already had
I don't think well, if they promised them something that we had not made a commitment, we told them we would look at it. But I don't think we had made a commitment. That's where we, if we can do,
I think the school system may have.
It's 500.
I don't think they made a commitment, but I think it was part of the discussion of that the
Right.
county commissioners are seriously gonna consider.
well, yeah, and we are. And we still, and we really gonna seriously commit, but they can't make no commitment of that which we have not already approved.
I will say, if y'all feel comfortable with us increasing that fund balance appropriation, I think it would be money well spent.
I do too.
Now, you saw that list and a copy of that summary of the school's budget. They've got a lot of things in there. So if we put an amount, say 500,000, we'll have to say, this is what you'll have to use, so they'll have to make some decisions among those lines. Because they got stuff in there, the 1 percentage point supplement increase for bus drivers and certified, all of those things. If we put that, they'll have to make some decisions about how they spread that in.
How does the board feel about that now? There's no would be any objections on it.
We're only funding half of what they asked for.
Let's go ahead and put it in the budget. Let's go ahead and do the fund balance.
The 500 or half of?
Do the 500.
The 500, I mean,
You
that's
just,
approximately half of what they asked for.
Okay,
and
all
the
right.
next time you bring it to us, don't give us the option.
Yes, sir.
Go on and just do it.
I just want y'all
You
to
give
know.
us too much,
I
you
just-
give us too much to discuss, okay?
Want y'all to know.
I just think that if we've hired 60% of the staff and they've said that we are gonna seriously consider it, we need to at least give them some ability to consider that.
And I have no objection.
I agree.
I would, so that they can hold the staff. I would agree.
Absolutely.
Whatever it takes.
Okay, great. All right, we'll pass that along.
Okay.
So, just in summary, so budget as it is, what are we accomplishing? We are reducing our tax rate, perhaps not as much as maybe some would like for us to, but we would be reducing our tax rate, addressing some critical capital needs, improving our employee compensation, strategically using debt potentially, strategically investing in getting off the list initiative, lowering our fund balance appropriation from current years, preserving funds from Nash County Schools for Edgecombe County Public Schools. You know, it's not a foregone conclusion that current expense has to come back, but we've always said that's going to be our goal to do that. And of course, you know, addressing some of your key priorities. So any questions or any additional information that we did not provide that you would like to have before you take action on your final budget?
Great job.
Get that animal shelter built.
I think we've asked him to move forward with that proposal.
All right, so just as a reminder, we will advertise for public hearing at your June meeting. I will give a similar presentation. I will have then the actual budget message, which we are required to provide with the proposed budget. I will also have to call out in a prominent way what the revenue neutral rate would be, but of course be sharing all the information that you've seen today. Also, and as we've normally have done, we've not taken action on that budget at that regular meeting in June, planning for a second meeting later in June. My phone is over there. I think it's June 25th is what we proposed. So if you would, if you put that on your calendar, that will be a 6 o'clock meeting as well. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, to the board.
Is there anything for the board meeting?
Nothing else after this? Is this it?
This is it,
For the
yes.
presentation for the budget?
We'll have the public hearing at your June meeting.
And you were proposing 88 cents.
Oh, yes.
What?
Thank you. No, you do have another meeting. You got another meeting on Monday. Tax appeals,
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
tax appeal.
I think he was in reference to the budget, right?
Yeah, this is the budget.
Yeah.
You're saying 88 cents.
88 cents. It's what I'm recommending and what's in the budget now.
Well, y'all gonna think I'm crazy because I was disappointed to see it at 88%. But I think we ought to consider 89%. Number one, you're not gonna touch 90, and it's not gonna make much difference when you go 88 to 90. Number two, we can take that 1 cent and pay for that 5% a month loader you were gonna buy, or give the teachers. But in reality, and logically, I mean, I don't know that 88 to 89 is gonna change somebody shooting at me or throwing at me. And I don't think it will. And I'm not,
So what did the budget committee recommend?
88.
we,
Was it 2 to 1?
Well,
Now hush. We said,
Yeah,
give her 8.
I think, I'm gonna support Mr. Boswell. Anytime Mr. Boswell said we ought to do something in moving a tax number, we need to do it.
Well,
And it's helpful because, you know,
No, he don't do
I
that
think the
often.
last time this happens, we made it sure that we wouldn't have to come back
that's what I'm talking
and
about.
do a year from now. Tax rates are hard. We built in so that we wouldn't have to continue looking at adjusting every year an increase in the tax.
The board needs to consider what's happening at Kingsborough when we have that discussion as well.
So what?
What's happening at Kingsborough? I mean, that should help us next year.
Regardless,
Well,
it's 3 years
I
away.
think we would be in, we would be in
Nothing
a
happening
position
right
to probably where we can reduce, when things are happening at Kingsborough, where we can reduce the tax rate. But I think the board should, and I'm just as serious as Mr. Baldwin said, and a lot of times we don't want to address the issue of raising taxes in the very near future.
What is our fund, that's the reason why I'm asking
And
all
that
these
gives
fund
us
balance
400.
questions. We're at 26% now. What is our,
It dropped, I think, to 17% because of the way the offer money was done, so it should go back up. And we do expect to return some funds back to fund balance this year.
Right.
We don't have a definitive figure, but we don't expect to.
so we have plenty of cash, so there's no need for us to generate more revenue if we have balances in our fund balance.
But we are right where the state we were gonna be right where the state requires us to be.
As of the 20.
But that's just because of some accounting. We actually have more fund balance than
Well,
that.
we don't know what that audited number will be for this year.
Right.
We have hopes and expect to return some, and I see that number go up, but we won't know until the audit is complete.
But our guidance says we have to be at 15%,
Well, state says 8,
State says
and our
8.
policy is 15.
so we're still above it.
We're above.
We're above.
And we're expecting it to go higher.
Well, we're hopeful.
But you got a lot of options here, as you're saying, put it in the budget and look and see what it looks like.
But we did some things to, we just suggested some things that we're gonna have to put some of that fund balance back into the budget. I'm satisfied wherever we are, okay, but,
So as you saw, 1 cent gives us that 400, I forgot.
437. All I'm saying
who should
is,
pay for the excavator?
there's gonna be an uproar no matter what we
Yeah,
do. And the difference between 88 cent, 89 cent ain't gonna change the uproar one way or the other to me. And if we get 90, yeah, it's a mind thing. But, you know, it's gonna be an uproar for a while and it's gonna calm down, but we are where we are till when again? How many more years? As far as
8.
rebound,
8.
there you go. So, that's just my
Be
thoughts.
retired.
That's all I can tell you.
Where's the board? Where's the board on that?
89 puts us 96 in the county, in the state, 88 puts us 95th. So we are getting off that list.
All right.
So which direction do we want to send him? 88 or 89? He
Well-
needs to know.
I support Mr. Ball's position.
I still say 88.
Anybody else?
I'll go 89.
Knock us on down.
88.
88.
I can't believe that we are proposing increasing taxes.
I know, right? I'm just so happy about the 8.
Where are you?
Okay,
89.
all right, they got it. No problem.
All right, we'll do that. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all so much. Appreciate your attention.
Thank you, you're doing a great job. All of you.
And we got, you didn't tell us we had lunch,
Yes, sir. Have lunch, and we'll have that in 2-6.
in 2-6?
Motion to
Was it a
adjourn.
meeting, a motion to, or do you want to wait till after lunch? or what?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Huh?
because we
Motion
got
motion to
all
adjourn,
that
We're at
okay.
work.
Motion to adjourn, okay. You gotta get a second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor, let me know by